IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Friday. That means it is mailbag time. That's the guy, Ryan Roberts. He looks much better today. All right, he's back on the mend. He's feeling better. So I tried to say, hey, look, I'll give you another day. But he was ready to rock and roll. He missed y'all. So Ryan's jumping back into the show today. And we have a lot to discuss, but the topics are going to be determined by you all. So today is the Friday free-for-all mailbag. We obviously would prefer that the topics be stuck to Notre Dame football, Notre Dame basketball, if you'd like. The women's team just had a couple of their recruits named to the McDonald's All-American game. Would have been 3 if Cass Prosper wasn't already enrolled in school. There's all the college football questions you want. But if there's other things you guys want to get into, we'll get into those too. That's why we call it Friday Free-for-All. So, Ryan, let's get into it, man. We got a lot of great questions. We already have over 30 questions already started. And so we're going to get going here. But before we get into questions, I do want to pull up this from one of our members, one of our OGs. Notre Dame 2164 has been with us for a long time, as far as I can remember when we started Irish Breakdown. He says, guys, please say a prayer for my brother Eric. He's at a very low point in his life and is officially at a crossroads. Please pray that he will make the right choice. Love you guys. We will do that. We will definitely do that. Writing that down right now. So we'll be praying for Eric. My wife has a friend whose husband is in a very similar situation. So definitely pray that God grant him the wisdom and touch his soul to get to where he needs to get to, man. So you definitely have that. So I wanted to kind of start things off with that and send that out there because that's kind of what we are, right? I mean, we're a community, right? We're not just people here talking sports. We're a community. We're a family to a degree. And so that's one of the things we do here. So we appreciate you bringing that to us. Absolutely. So, Ryan, let's get to some football questions. And we're going to start off with John A1. Speaking of OGs, John A1 is going to kick us off here with some football questions.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you mentioned there's 30-plus questions already in the chat, Brian. That was before we even started the podcast, which was fantastic. But from John A1, with veteran players joining new programs, what challenges do coaching staffs face when it comes to player development? Good question.
Yeah.
I mean, Brian, can I say, first and foremost is that usually the strategy, and one that Notre Dame subscribes to, is developing through the high school ranks, right? Being able to recruit at a high level. And then it's almost like I don't want to call it like it's not a minor league system, but it is a system of development that you want to start from the bottom and then develop to the peak of the players that they can be, obviously, throughout the course of their career, right? So what the transfer portal is doing, in my opinion, John, is it's creating an easier pathway for teams to make quick fixes from a year-to-year basis, which, Michigan State 2 years ago, for instance, right? Like they were reeling and then they hit a bunch of home runs in the transfer portal and that was a one-year success. But then you see what Michigan State did this past year and it's like, but that wasn't sustainable, right? That was a one-year fix. It's not a long-term investment. It's not a long-term answer. So I think that for me, it's when you're talking about joining new programs, it might help initially. It might help that first year. But long-term, I think it is setting some of these programs back because you're sacrificing development and you are also alienating some players at times with things that they were promised. You bring in quick fixes and then they get angry or upset in the role that they are now in, which is one that they were not kind of looking forward to. So I think that it's a quick fix versus what's long-term investment might be a better thing from sustaining success, if that makes sense.
I think what it comes down to for Notre Dame, because it's different for every staff, right? Some staffs don't care if they lose other players because they bring in a transfer. Like, well, that guy didn't pan out anyway, so I don't care if he stays, move on from him. And that's just the reality of how it goes. But, for a staff like Notre Dame, it's, hey, how does that impact player development? Well, I think it requires that, number one, there always be honest conversations when you recruit kids, and that there always be honest conversations in the offseason when you're talking to kids. And so I think that you've got to let kids know when you're recruiting them, look, our goal is always going to do whatever we have to do to go compete for a championship. And that's always going to be our goal. And every move we make is going to be towards that. And if you're someone who can help us with that, then we're going to give you that opportunity, and we're in that kind of thing. I think here's the other key too, Brian. Notre Dame did not have enough coaches, in my opinion, especially on defense. And I look at the front seven with this being a major problem. They did not have enough coaches, in my view, that spend enough time developing the whole roster. And that's a problem. It's a lot easier to do that at like running back. You don't have that many guys. Tight end, you don't have that many guys. Offensive line, defensive line, quarterback, even though you'd think it'd be easier because not that many guys, but some coaches tend to just kind of focus on the starter and the backup, and they don't worry about the other guys. Receiver, it's an issue. D-line, it's an issue. O-line, it's an issue. Linebacker, it's an issue. In my opinion, just generally speaking in football, it's those are issues where you've got to be very mindful of the fact that you're developing the entire roster, because those are the positions that tend to have the highest numbers of players. And so if you're just someone who, you get your young guy and you bring him in and you just ship him down to scout team for the whole year and then you just don't really deal with him the rest of the year, you're a bad coach. You just are. You're not good at developing players. You're not good at developing young people. And to me, there was a little bit too much of that last year in the front seven, at linebacker and the defensive line, from things that I have been told. More so of an issue at linebacker, in my view. And that to me is something that's got to change. And so like I told you this example, I talked to a parent of a player who plays corner, and his son played very little this year. And one of the reasons his son has not even thought twice about leaving is because he still feels like Mike Mickens is invested in developing him. That's a good freaking college football coach right there, because he's not just focused on Benjamin Morrison and Cam Hart and Clarence, those the guys that are playing. He's coaching the whole roster still. And that's what you love to see. That's what college coaches are supposed to be about. That's how Marcus Freeman was an assistant coach. That's what Marcus Freeman has to demand from all of his assistant coaches. That's one of the things you love about Harry Hiestand. We always were told this. Charles Jagusah mentioned this to Sean Davis in an interview. He's like, I loved how he was coaching the second team, not even the start, how he was coaching the second group of guys and the younger guys. That's what a good coach is supposed to do, Ryan. And so for me, that's the key right there. That's how you get development, because if you're a good coach, kids can develop by not playing on Saturday to the point where they're a little bit more ready to play on Saturday when that time comes. And so as long as you're someone who understands that developing my entire roster for 12 months is my number one priority, my entire roster as a position coach, then at a place like Notre Dame, you're going to be fine. Because at the end of the day, Ryan, there are some programs that are going to be able to kind of just do what USC's doing. And just every year they're going to go to the portal for 10, 12 kids and just reshape their roster because they can kind of pick and choose who they want to a degree. Michigan State can't do that, to your point. Notre Dame can't do that. So you can't sacrifice the future for the present from when it comes to development. You can sacrifice the future for the present from the standpoint of maybe a guy doesn't get as many reps in games because you brought in an older player and he's going to play that role. But it can't sacrifice the future from, well, now that we have Sam Hartman, I don't have to worry about developing Tyler Buckner. That would be an example of that's bad. I don't have to worry about coaching up Jaden Mickey or Chance Tucker or whoever else because I now have Thomas Harper in the slot, right? Do you think Mike Mickens is going to have that mentality? Heck no, because he understands I'm going to need that kid someday. I may not need Micah Bell right now, but I may need him in week 10 if we have some injuries, or I'm going to need him next year, that kind of thing. That's what good coaches do. Hey, I may not need Nolan Ziegler right now or Jalen Sneed right now, but I may need them by the end of the year next year. So I'm going to coach them up accordingly so whenever their number's called, they're going to be ready, instead of just saying, hey, go play scout team for the next 2 months and I'll see you in November.
Right.
And that's the reality of Notre Dame has to be that kind of program. And this is the kind of portal success I expect them to have every year. 4 to 6 kids, and that's about it, right? And it's targeted, to your point, Ryan. But you want to get to the point where you get your positions where the only time you're really going to get in a portal guy is if something strange happens. You have a guy that maybe develops faster than you thought, and he leaves in 3 years instead where you thought you might have him for 5, or 4 or 5, or you have a rash of injuries, right? A guy goes pro and you had 2 guys suffer major injuries, but I gotta go to the portal and shore that up. So you're just kind of, like you said, picking and choosing these couple spots over here because Notre Dame is not going to be an overhaul the roster every year team like USC. They're just not. Don't try to be what you can't be. Except embrace who you are, and who you need to be and who you are needs to be. We are going to develop every single kid that's on this roster and every kid's at a different stage of development. And if you're in a position like offensive line, so you know what Harry Heastand does, he's got like multiple people that work with the linemen. You got Chris Watt, you got analysts. I mean, there's multiple people that work with those kids. Then do that, right? And that's a very important piece to this.
Well, and I was going to say that both sides of the coin are not the perfect. It's not the perfect formula, right? Like you need both of them together. You know, like you mentioned, like Notre Dame taking 4, 5, 6 guys somewhere in that ballpark is probably a good idea because, yeah, in a perfect world, you want to just recruit and develop and, you know, be almost like a farm system to, you know, how you develop your process. But at the end of the day, transfers are going to happen. Injuries are going to happen. And I think it's about making a calculated decision that's what's best for your football team, right? And some people might not like it 100%, but it's almost like, you know, Sam Hartman is a person that you used, right? The initial return of Sam Hartman for a year might be a good investment to maybe take a little bit of time away from a Steve Angeli, for instance, right? Maybe a Kenny Minchie for year one, a little bit, right? You still need to coach those guys up and you still need them to develop, but there's a slight sacrifice that you need to make because there's a new guy in the room, obviously, right? Some time is going to be allocated towards him, obviously. So I think that there needs to be a direct mix. And I'll also say this, Brian, is that from the other perspective of like load up, because I mean, be honest, right? Impulse from my end is that when I see a really talented player hit the portal, I'm like, hey, maybe Notre Dame should look at that guy because I'm like, that guy's a good football player, right? Like you want to bring more talent into the room. But the fact of the matter is that quick and easy, I should say known commodities are not always the best commodities. I'll put it like that, right? Like a Byron Vaughns, for instance, was a guy that we talked about a little bit, right? Was he a slightly more known commodity than what we have in the Viper room right now if you're Notre Dame? Sure. I mean, he's played a lot more football, right? Like you know more about Byron Vaughns than you do about Aiden Gabira, for instance. But does that mean that he's the best option? Not necessarily, right? Because you know what he is. You already see his ceiling. You know about where he's going to be as a football player in 2023. I know very little of what to expect of Joshua Burnham next year. I know very little of what to expect from Aiden Gabira. But the fact is that if one of those players does hit, or both of them, then it might be better than Byron Vaughns, right? So the known commodity is not always the best commodity, in my opinion. So I just want to kind of put that out there too.
That's a good point, Ryan, because you got to look at where are these guys in their development. If a guy's like, this guy is clearly going to need another year, right? Like this guy's not ready. Then say, hey, let's go find it, right? But if you're like, this kid may not be ready now, but I'm really curious to see what he's going to do in the spring and summer and then fall camp. You may not want to take those reps away from him. And that's kind of my feeling with the Viper. I think the Viper, that was a great example, Ryan, because I don't want to take a single rep away from Josh Burnham and Jordan Patel-Ho and Junior Tuamaka and Aiden Gabira. I don't want to have to split that up at all. See who develops, because you don't need all 4 of them to develop. You need 2 of them really to develop. One is a starter, and then a guy that can be a rotation guy, or maybe you have co-starters because they're both really good, and then a third guy, whatever the case may be, and you go from there. So I think that's a great example, Ryan, where there are other positions, nickel, where there is no clear answer. Like I don't know if Jaden Mickey's a natural nickel. Maybe he becomes one, but the staff doesn't have a lot of confidence in that because they just haven't had a chance to work that with him because he had to be an outside guy this year and he was not a nickel. So maybe Jaden becomes that guy. And maybe during the spring you realize, hey, now we have 2 good nickels. But right now it was like we didn't really have any except for Clarence Lewis, who could have been a good nickel. But if you put Clarence Lewis in the nickel, now you take away a corner, you take away a potential safety, and you've kind of hurt yourself as opposed to adding a guy to that position and then letting him compete. So I think that's a great example. And then we had a follow-up question here from Garland Doxy, excuse me. He says, to piggyback off John A1, does it also affect development when kids don't have the pressure of someone taking their spot so they can complacent coach and player? I think that's very, very accurate. I think that's a big thing is as long as transfers have to win their spots, that's the big thing. You've got to make sure that, and this is something that kind of hurt a little bit of the chemistry in 2021, Ryan, is because there were some people that would watch certain transfer play and say, that guy is not good like week after week after week, and you keep trotting him out there. And I don't understand why. Right. And I think as long as you can avoid those situations, like, hey, look, this guy you brought in, Sam Hartman comes in, he's throwing 6 interceptions every day and struggling and all this, and then Tyler Buckner's just ripping the defense apart, and you keep starting Sam Hartman, they're going to be like, why? Like, okay, so clearly this isn't a meritocracy like Marcus Freeman says, right? This isn't about best man's going to play. You clearly must have promised that guy this, that, or the other thing. As long as you avoid that, so hey, so and so comes in, but during fall camp, so and so is your third best player at that position. You better make him your third best player, knowing that you may hurt yourself in the portal down the road, because you've got to make sure that the culture in your program never changes. And I think Garland's got a good point. Is, hey, you may think, hey, I'm next in line. I'm next in line in this position. I have arrived. Nope, because we're going to bring in somebody to compete with you. And I think that's healthy as long as you have a culture of, we're going to play the best guy, whether it's a freshman, returner, transfer, whoever. Then I think they'll be fine.
Well,
I think they'll be fine.
You mentioned what makes a good coach. I also think what makes a good coach is knowing that, hey, I might have this super talented kid, but he's a kid that needs a kick in the butt occasionally, right? A kid that needs to be challenged. Then that is even more of an indicator of like, hey, getting a veteran that's a more known commodity to compete with this kid, not necessarily be the starter. That added pressure could help you, right? But then there's other kids that, I mean, like there's some players, Michael Mayer is like one that comes to mind for me, where it's like, I don't know if he ever needs to be challenged to be the best version of himself. Right?
Go back to your original example, Ryan, of Viper.
Yeah.
Everything. So it's like Jordan Patojo, never had a question with him about talent. It's always, where's his focus at, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do you need to bring in a transfer to push him? Well, you got to evaluate what you have behind him. And from everything I've heard about the players behind him, they're grinders. Josh Burnham gets after it. Junior Chalamaka gets after it. So, okay, we don't need to bring in a transfer to push him. We've got those kids already here. Sometimes you may not have that, Ryan, and to your point. And look, sometimes too, it's simply about, hey, this kid's doing everything we're asking him to do. We got a chance to go get a transfer that's a significantly better player, and that's what we got to do, because we're Notre Dame and we're trying to win a championship. Now, I think, we like to use like references and like movies and food references and historical references and all that. But I'll say this, Ryan, one thing that pops in my head when I think about this, I always think about the movie Miracle. Did you ever see that movie with Kurt Russell? Okay. Do you remember the scene where he brings in that stud from his college team?
Yes.
And he brings him in and he lets the kid try. I mean, it was a mental, he was playing mind games with those kids.
Timmy Hare or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
And they went to him and were like, hey, we're a family, we're here. And so like, you've got to kind of have that too, because sometimes you may do something and say, hey, we're not going to do this because I think it's going to hurt the culture of our program. Or sometimes I think our culture is getting complacent. So I'm going to do this to shake things up a little bit. Either way is kind of a direction that you want to go with that, Ryan. And that's part of it too, is you've got to know the needs of your roster, not just from we need a nickel or we need a quarterback standpoint, but what's this going to do to our locker room? And sometimes it's going to shake it up. And sometimes that is going to be a good thing. And sometimes that's not a good thing. And you got to know your team well enough to know what that's going to be.
Yes. Back to being a good coach, understanding how your guys are going to react to that. That's big. That's why we also talk about the personality and kind of the relationship building from a recruiting perspective. And that's why it matters, man. You need to know who you're bringing into the room to understand what makes them tick. So great conversation there.
Yes. Great starter. Great starter to this. We got one here from Tommy Guns here.
Tommy Guns. Yep. Tommy Guns wants to know for his mailbag question, Android or iPhone? Brian, I don't think it's close, man.
I'm an iPhone simply because that's what my wife bought me. So,
iPhone.
Bro,
yes. I was an Android believer for a long time. Then I got an iPhone. I'm like, I was a little bit of an Android apologist for a while, and then I quickly realized that iPhone, in my opinion, is quite superior.
I think I've told you this, Ryan. If I could have a flip phone, I would be Jethro Gibbs, man, NCIS, right?
You're like my dad, man. You're like my dad.
I hate how big iPhones are. They just take up so much. Like, I just give me a small flip phone and I'll be good to go. But especially if I had an iPad, like then my iPad could do everything my iPhone can do, and I'd be much happier. But
see, my dad's a maintenance director, so he does a lot of, maintenance work throughout the day. So he always just like messes up his phones and stuff. So he's like, just give me a flip phone. That thing's indestructible. I'm like, sure, I get it.
For real. Yeah. The way it works in our house is whenever a new phone comes out and my wife wants it, she gets it, and then I get her hand-me-down. So that's just whatever. It's how it works, and I don't care because if I'm not a phone guy.
It's pretty much how my dad is too in my mom and dad's household. So
yep, absolutely. And Tommy Guns has another one. So here's an interesting question.
So from Tommy, which makes Irish Breakdown more money usually? Live shows with super chats or recorded ones with ads?
All shows have ads. So number one. So we're not getting ad revenue from you watching necessarily right now because you're watching live and there's no ads. But a lot of people, most of our listens, so we'll have right now we have 240 people in the chat right now, which is a low number. It's steadily growing. It's been up about 50 up 50 in the last 10 minutes. But so we don't have a ton here, but this show will get 5,000-6,000 views at the end. And those vast majority of those are going to be people watching later. So our ad revenue doesn't change a whole ton. When we have good months making money off this show, it's when we get a lot of super chats. I mean, that's just the reality of it. So the ad revenue really doesn't change a whole lot. It doesn't. That's why football season tends to be a much better financial situation for us because we make a lot more money in the fall. We do it throughout the year simply because it's still better than not doing it, and because we like y'all and we want to keep building this community up. But yeah, that's pretty much how it works. And then also we make a lot more money off the podcast than we do the YouTube channel. So the other thing is we do these live shows and then we put them on the podcast app, and that's where we make even better money. So I say, unless you just like looking at us, if you're going to listen to the show later, it's for us, it's better to do it on the podcast.
So what you're saying is that Tommy should send us a super chat to apologize for his name right now.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's long overdue. Yeah. I think it's long.
I think that's like worthy of $200, honestly, but it's just my opinion.
Nah, he's all good.
Just kidding.
He's all good. All right, here's one from Irish Blooded, Ryan.
Besides Marcus Freeman, who do you think is the next head coach to win their first national championship?
Let's look at the coaches that are close, Ryan. I think you got to look at Ryan Day. He's not that far away. And they were just get one more first down or one more stop in the fourth quarter from beating Georgia. And if they beat Georgia, I think they probably beat TCU.
I have one. Yeah. I think it's Josh Heupel's my answer from Tennessee. I like what he's doing at Tennessee.
Sure. He's got a lot of improvement he needs to make to the roster. I want to see him also develop a culture that can sustain a whole season. Yep. But he's doing some good things there. I don't think Mike Norvell is a silly one to mention now, because the more he keeps winning at Florida State, the more he's going to start getting better players. And you're in a league where you can ascend. I think Lincoln Riley's in that conversation as well. You can't ignore that because he has not won a national championship yet. I don't know if the way he's building his roster is going to be good enough to win a championship, but they're not that far off. And as long as he's got a big-time quarterback, because that's the key to Lincoln Riley's offense. When he doesn't have a big-time quarterback, they're not as good. Just go watch what his team was with Lincoln Riley, with Spencer Rattler. They weren't anywhere close to being a title contender. So he needs that dude. And if he has that dude, then he's pretty good. So, they're a team to watch out for this year to potentially get hot and make a run. Look, I
want to see what year 2 looks like, but Dan Lanning at Oregon's, I think, is an interesting one. He's building something pretty.
Yeah, I don't like the way he's building it. I don't like the way he's building it, and I don't like the way his team folded down the stretch. To be honest with you, I think he's kind of a prick too, so I kind of dislike him a little bit.
I agree.
But I think every time his team faced a really tough challenge, they kind of got punked a little bit last year. And to me, that said something a little bit to me. Like, you got all this tough bravado, you just out-talented people, but when you had to go against somebody that could punch you in the mouth a little bit, you didn't really handle it real well, and so they had the one example against UCLA was a good win, but they got smashed by Georgia. This got absolutely embarrassed in the second half against Oregon State, got out coached by Washington. And honestly, they had a nice win over Utah. They played like crap in that game. It's just Utah played even worse. Cam Rising was missing wide open dudes the whole game. That to me was more about how bad Utah played than it was about how Oregon played. And they had no business winning over North Carolina in that game. Again, that was more about North Carolina than it was about Oregon. So, yeah, he's doing some things, but I don't think I think the whole like Lincoln Riley went out and sort of built an all-star team with transfers and stuff, and they did some buying too. But the way that he went about buying players late without having the established relationships, you're just trying to find a player to fit a role. I don't know how that's going to work, man. I really don't. And honestly, I dislike him a little bit, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. So I'm kind of rooting against him.
That.
I mean, if Oregon had Oregon State's coach, we'd be having a conversation about that. If Jonathan Smith was at Oregon, we'd be having a different conversation. How does Texas do with Steve Sarkisian? Can he recruit well enough and to build a defense? That's a question mark. I'll tell you, who my sleeper is in the Pac-12 instead of Dan Lanning? It's Kalen DeBoer. Because Washington is a state that produces a lot of in-state talent. You can recruit California, and he's got a very, very dynamic offensive system. You're recruiting to Seattle. You're not recruiting to Eugene. Let's be honest. That's a different animal. And some may say that's good. Some may say that's bad. But Seattle's a much bigger city and a lot more happening there. So that's one to kind of keep an eye on too, Ryan, for me. But I don't like put Jim Harbaugh in that conversation. I don't put Jimbo's won a title. I don't think Brian Kelly's a guy that's going to win a championship at LSU. If you include him I don't even know if you should include Brian Kelly in this conversation, because he has won 2 championships. I mean, not at the Division I level, but he's a national champion. Brian Kelly has national championship rings. I mean, so you can't discredit that. So as much as I dislike him when he goes into the up for Hall of Fame vote, you can't say, wait, never won a national championship. Yes, he did. He absolutely did. And he would have won 3 if Kurt Aines doesn't get hurt in the playoffs in that first year. Because his best team might have been that first team that lost in the playoffs because Kurt Aines got hurt. That team was disgustingly good. So those would probably be my answers for that one, Ryan.
I like the Kalen DeBoer one. This is where I am with that, though, is that I think he's a really good coach, and I think that he's going to build Washington into a consistently good to really good football team. I just question if Washington's going to be able to recruit to the degree to win a national championship. That's just where I am.
Because of what the state produces. I'll give you an example. If Kalen DeBoer was in year 3 of what he's building right now, when Emeka Egbuka was coming out of high school, do you think he leaves the state and goes to Ohio State? Or do you think he might stay at home? Right? You know what I mean? What about Tobias Merriweather? Right? I mean, so to me, Washington produces really good football players. I mean, Notre Dame's had some of them. They can recruit the state of California. They can recruit Hawaii. They can, and they've proven to be a pretty decent, transfer destination because of what happened with Michael Penix. So I also look at the fact that one of the things that tells me about what kind of culture a coach is building is how your players handle when they have opportunities to go make money. And you saw 3 guys that had a chance to be potential day 2 draft picks this year say, no, I'm coming back because I want more of this. Now, part of it is because they maybe want to become day 1 draft picks. But look, you tell me if I'm wrong here. Jalen McMillan with a good offseason is a potential day 2 draft pick. Roma Dunze with a good offseason is a potential day 2 draft pick. And Braylon Trice, to me, is definitely a day 2 type of draft pick if they'd have come out this year.
Yeah,
right?
I think Trice is a top 50 pick if he comes out. He's very
all
good.
Came back, right? Yeah. They all came back. Part of it is to improve their draft stock. We're not naive, but the other part is they want to be a part of what he's building there. And that says something to me about the kind of culture that he's building there, Ryan. So I think Washington can recruit well enough because, again, it's recruit well enough to do what? Win 2 games, win 3 games in the postseason moving forward. They're going to have a greater opportunity to get into the playoff now because of the expanded playoff. And they're not going to have the same gauntlet week after week after week that other teams are going to have. Especially the Big 12, the SEC when it adds Texas and Oklahoma, the Big 10 when it adds USC and UCLA. That's the other part too, is he's now going to be in a Pac-12 that's going to be much easier to dominate. And I think you're going to see some of those West Coast kids be like, I don't want to play if I wanted to play all my games in the freaking Midwest, I would go play in the Big Ten, go to a Big Ten school. So I think you're going to see some West Coast kids that don't want to play in the cold, going to say, well, why am I going to go to USC when I have to play 2 months of my season are going to be played in the cold, in road games. So I think that'll help Washington as well. So that's a dark horse team for me. I mean, long way to go, right? They're a long way away from that right now. But look, they've got a really good foundation. And look, he beat Texas this year at the end of the year. That's a name win. He's doing a really nice job. And there's going to be a lot of receivers that are going to start looking at that school as like, and go to USC and compete. Yeah, quarterbacks as well. I can go to USC and have to compete with 9 other receivers. I go to Washington and be the dude, and I think that's something. But again, I think a part of it is that's a state that produces a lot of really good football players. And so they've had success going down into Arizona and getting kids. That's where they got Braylon Trice. They beat Notre Dame for Braylon Trice. Notre Dame wanted him. So they're a dark horse for me, Ryan. They're a dark horse for me.
Now, I have dreams of Braylon Trice as a big end in Notre Dame's defense, but that's a
or
conversation for
flip him
day.
and Foskey, whatever. Have them on opposite ends. I don't care how you do it.
Man.
Yeah, that would be that would be fun to watch. That would be fun to watch. Let's got a super chat here from Ryan Prott. Ryan says, yeah, go ahead. You got that one, Ryan? Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're fine. You're fine. Great first name, Ryan, by the way. Hey guys, have you heard that Notre Dame's involvement in the video game next year? I know Swarbrick said they wouldn't be involved unless the players got paid. Appreciate the work y'all do. So we're talking about NCAA for next year.
Mm-hmm. The players are going to get paid. I mean, that's the reality of it. That's the whole point of why they're bringing it back. That's going to be a thing of what I wonder is he saying like, well, we're going to get our cut. You need to make sure you get another cut to the players. Or EA is going to be like, we're giving you your cut and you can disperse it however the heck you want to disperse it. You give the players whatever you want from it. That's up to you. That's what I would like to see. But look, there's going to be no way that Notre Dame's not in that. Like Marcus Freeman and his entire staff and everybody involved with the football program and people like us will raise holy heck.
And recruits will too.
Oh,
recruits
well,
will
no.
too.
It won't. I mean, recruits just make, well, you're clearly not relevant.
Yes.
I mean, look, that's a cultural phenomenon. It is. And if I go to Notre Dame, I can't be on NCAA football. Don't kid yourself that some teenagers will make a decision off of that. If they're close and it's like I'm Notre Dame or here, I'm like Notre Dame won't even let me be on NCAA football. That'll crush them. So to me, a lot of that. I think what y'all have to understand is a lot of that's just negotiation. Jack Swarbrick's a lawyer. What's he supposed to say? No, we'll figure it out. You just gave away all your leverage. Because here's the deal. Notre Dame needs to be on NCAA football. But don't kid yourself. NCAA football needs Notre Dame as well. So neither side wants it to be where they don't get it. So if you're Jack Swarbrick, you can't just give away all your leverage. Your only leverage you have is we won't participate unless you get us a deal that you want. Because here's the unique thing about Notre Dame. Notre Dame negotiates by itself with EA Sports about that, whereas everything else is part of the NCAA or their conference, right? You ever remember back in the day when it would load, you have all the different logos of people and there'd always be like that Notre Dame logo with all the conferences and NCAA, and there's just that Notre Dame all by itself. So Notre Dame is in a unique position. So they don't have the SEC bargaining chip of we're the SEC. You don't pay us what we want. And 16, you don't get 16 schools. Notre Dame's by itself. And so that's their leverage. They're going to be in the game. There's no way. Jack Swarbrick, one thing, whether you like all his decisions or not, whatever you think about Jack Swarbrick, that's a pretty sharp dude. He's not stupid enough to actually not have Notre Dame in that. But he also is smart enough to know I have to use the only leverage I have, and the only leverage I have is to threaten that we're not going to be in the game. And so it's a bargaining chip. That's all it is. So I'm fully confident that Notre Dame will be in that, Ryan. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
No, I mean, I never even once thought that there would be a possibility that they wouldn't be in it, right? And I mean, I need them to be in it because I'm tired of playing NCAA 14 and getting bored. I want the real deal moving forward. I want to move back to the triple option, the heydays of Notre Dame football. Let's get it rocking, baby. That's all it is.
Notre Dame was not a triple option team. They were a power option team. There is a difference. There is a difference. You weren't even born when they were running that offense. I didn't want to hear it. So here we got another one from John A1.
From John A1. With veteran players joining. Oh, we already answered this one.
Oh, we did? Sorry.
Yes.
My bad.
John says, if Deion Colsey, Tobias Merriweather, and Jane Thomas are the 1A wide receiver unit, which three are the best 1B units for Notre Dame?
That's a good one, Ryan. For me, it would be Lorenzo Styles.
At what spot?
I have to go Lorenzo Styles at X.
Okay.
I would go Caleb Smith at W. And I would go Jaden Greathouse at Z in the slot. So just so people know, somebody asked us on the board. This is a very good question. The guy was like, look, in my whole life, I've always looked at the boundary receiver as the X. Why did you guys change it? Well, we didn't. That's just what Notre Dame calls it. If in my offensive system, the boundary is the X. So it's always been that way. But that's just what Notre Dame calls it. So we're just, so that way, like I've never called it a weak side end a Viper. It's just what Notre Dame calls it. So, that's what I would. Yeah.
We 100% agree. Caleb Smith is the boundary receiver, the W in this situation. I also agree with the two guys you said to the field there. I mean, you know how high I am on Jaden Greathouse, right? So Jaden Greathouse, Lorenzo Styles, I wouldn't necessarily pencil them into a slot or to the field necessarily. I think that they could be a little bit interchangeable in some ways. I don't know if you agree with that.
The reason that I would go with Jaden Thomas there is because I don't want to, you're looking at your second team. There's merit to having two different types of slots in certain situations. But if I'm talking about what my depth chart would be, my number 2 there is going to be a guy that's going to be similar to the guy that's the number 1. So I don't have to completely change my offense if my number 1 gets hurt. Now, that doesn't mean there's not a role for a Caleb Smith, the younger role there, or Lorenzo to play there in a different type of role for the slot. So there's always going to be a little bit of crossover in that regard, Ryan. But as far as just like who's my depth chart, meaning when I look at the 1B, it's who steps into the lineup if that guy goes down. And that's where it comes from. So I think we're on the same page on that. Yep. I like having a slot that can do some different things, but that's a guy that, may not be my number 2. He may just kind of work in because we need that. And I think honestly right now, when you look at the 2023 roster, the guy that's going to give me a lot of that is not a receiver. It's going to be Chris Tyree out of the backfield is kind of how I'd look at it, to be honest with you. So if you don't have Chris Tyree, then maybe you need to figure out how to get somebody else that opportunity. That would be my group.
Love it.
Got another one from Irish Blooded here.
Irish Blooded, who do you think has a worse 1-year record after realignment? Texas or Oklahoma to SEC, or USC and UCLA to the Big 12? I mean, Big 10, excuse me.
Well, it depends on when it happens.
Yeah.
Because if Texas here's the funny thing. The admin at those schools continue to screw their football teams over, or at least try. I'm talking about the SEC teams. So not only are you going to make them leave the Big 12, where Oklahoma's dominated that conference for like a decade, and Texas is on the verge of becoming a dominant program in that conference. Now you move them to the SEC. Stupid thing number 1, when you're talking about just for the football team, not for revenue, because this isn't a football decision. This is a money decision. That's it. There's one reason only they're moving to the Big 10 for USC and UCLA. And there's one reason only that Oklahoma and Texas are going to the SEC. It's money. That's it. There's no good football reason for either one of those things to be true. So we can just get that out of the way. Now you're trying to expedite the process. So now you're limiting the number of years that Venables and Sarkisian have to stockpile their roster, and build their rosters up before they then have to go compete in that league. And so I think the team that would have the worst 1-year record because of that, to me, it's either UCLA or Oklahoma. Because I think both of those rosters are in a really tough spot. Like Oklahoma went to the portal for a lot of kids this year, but they're going to lose a lot of those kids next year. Because a lot of those portal kids are 1-year guys. Not all of them, but a lot of them. You're going to be breaking in a new quarterback in 2024. So I think Oklahoma, whereas in 2024, you're going into year 4 of Sarkisian, and he's going to have either Quinn Ewers, who's taken hold of that job and is that guy, or Arch is the guy. And I just think their roster's in a better position with guys they've recruited out of high school, which means more time to develop in the program, where Oklahoma's going to have to hope that they can get a bunch of portal success next year. And I don't see that going overly well. So I think UCLA is going to have a tougher move to the Big Ten just because I don't know where their roster is going to be. They're going to lose a lot of guys again next year. But I'll say this, Ryan, UCLA does have the easiest transition style of play-wise into their new conference.
Sure.
They very much fit. Like if you just didn't look at UCLA geographically and just looked at how they played, they very much are like a traditional Big Ten West team. Power running football team. I mean, that's who they are. So I just don't know where their talent of their roster is going to be. USC will be fine. They'll be the Ohio State of the other division, or if they go pods or whatever the case may be. I don't know how they're going to align it. But I think USC will make a fine transition, and I think Texas will make a smoother transition than Oklahoma, in my opinion.
I think talent-wise, Texas can make a pretty smooth transition. But my biggest question, because we're talking about a foresight of a year out, right? Is Sark's coming into a very important year in 2023, in my opinion, right? He's had a couple years now to stockpile talent. What if Texas goes 7-5 this year, 8-4? Right. Like, is that good enough? And then are you going to be dealing maybe with potential transition period making that move to the Big Ten? Like, that's my only question, or the SEC, excuse me. I mean, that's my only question with the Texas conversation, because I agree with you. They're recruiting at a nice level. I think they are acquiring a good amount of talents. And I think that roster is going to be better, and it's going to be okay moving into the SEC from a talent level perspective. Coaching stability is something that I'm curious to see. Oklahoma, I think, is in some trouble, man. I do, because they're going to recruit at a pretty good level, but at the end of the day, if players aren't buying in to what the coaching staff is selling, that is going to be a tough situation, in my opinion, right? Because that was the one biggest disappointment I had with Venables in year one. It wasn't the fact that they lost some football games in not great fashion, which is never good. But I really felt like the team quit a few times last year. I really did, man. Like I felt like there was no buy-in, right? And what is your reaction to the buy-in? Is to buy players, try to buy in still? Like I just think that I'm not very optimistic with the future of Oklahoma football. So I agree that they have the tougher transition compared to Texas. I am curious to see what the coaching just stability is going to look like for Texas going into the transition to the SEC. But I agree. I think Oklahoma's in a tougher spot there. USC, I think, will be fine, because at the end of the day, the Big Ten, we've talked about it a ton. Outside of the top two teams, it tapers off, right? There's a lot of question marks in the Big Ten outside of the top two. So I think USC will be fine. UCLA, I think, will be fine if they're able to acquire the talent. But to your point, will it be good enough to come in and have a seamless transition? I think that's a question to have. But if the Big Ten is anything in 2024 like it was this past season, then, I mean, can they beat an Iowa, a team that almost made the Big Ten championship game? You know what I mean? Like, it's just the Big Ten's a funky destination right now for any team right now. It's just it's a very poor conference after the top two.
Top three. Penn State proved to me they're a good team. I mean, dude, they went 11-2. They beat Utah, who you hyped up all year as a great team. So, I mean, I think they're a good team. Are they in the same league as Michigan and Penn State? No, they're not. But they're a good football team. They're a good football team. They've had, you keep shrugging your shoulders, but they've had how many 10, 11 win seasons in the last 6 years? Okay, so now you're just being kind of a jerk about it, or you actually feel that way?
I'm not being a jerk. I don't think I've never, not once last year did I watch Penn State and thought they were a good football team. Just me personally.
So you think they went 11-2 because they suck?
I don't think the Big Ten was very good last year.
I don't think the Big Ten was very good either, but they're not a bad football.
They had a good win over Utah. Utah was also dealing with some injuries. Cam Rising was banged up in that game.
They're a top 25 program. Would you say that? They don't believe.
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, so that's a good football program. They're not in the same level as the top two, but they're not in the same level as Iowa and Michigan State and Wisconsin and all those other programs. There's clearly that middle ground there where they are right now, to me. Right?
That's fair. That's fair.
So that's what I'm saying. There's three good teams in that league. And I also think this too, Ryan, is Penn State's last two recruiting classes have been really good.
Sure.
Like, they've added some dudes. Now, I don't have a lot of faith in James Franklin that's going to be able to get the most out of those dudes, if we're going to be honest about it. But they're able to here's the thing, right, to me. I think your reaction, tell me if I'm wrong, is due to the fact you just watch them like they're just not a really maximized roster. They're not a really well-coached team. You don't think they're going to go into this game, boy, they're going to scheme this up or do that.
100%.
But the thing about it is the NFL every year shows, the combine every year shows that team has talent. And what Penn State does is they just out-talent that entire league except for two teams. And that's Ohio State and Michigan. Because they get out they have more athleticism than Michigan. They can't compete with Michigan in the trenches, and Michigan's a better coach football team. And the only reason they're competitive against Ohio State every year is because that's the only team in the Big Ten, to me, that has the athletes to run with Ohio State. But they're just not coached well enough to actually beat Ohio State. Here's an example. A buddy of mine yesterday said this to me, Rye. He said, I think Ohio State's going to lose to Penn State next year. I said, what makes you say that? And he goes, well, they play them tough every year. I said, yeah, that's true. But how many times have they actually beat Ohio State in the last 10 years?
Right.
They've beaten them a few times, right? I said, once. From 2012 to last year, they've beaten Ohio State once. And that was that 2016 year where they won the Big Ten. So, yeah, they play them tough every year because they had Saquon Barkley. They had, Tracy McSorley was a really good college quarterback in that system. They've had Chris Godwin. They had Mike Gesicki. They've had Miles Sanders. I mean, they have legit NFL skill talent.
Yes.
And yet they still can't beat Ohio State. Why? Because Ohio State's coached better. But I do think when you look at them, they've got a Rose Bowl win, they've got a Cotton Bowl win. I mean, they've been a good team. And if they ever actually hired a coach that I thought was good, they would quickly become a much better team. I mean, look, we were begging for Notre Dame to land the running back and the quarterback they signed last year. I mean, how fired up would we have been if they would have got Drew Aller and Nick Singleton? So, and Notre Dame wanted Caden Saunders as well. They wanted Drew Shelton. I mean, Penn State kicked Notre Dame's butt on the recruiting trail in the 2022 class on offense.
They wanted Drew Shelton to tackle?
Yeah. Early on, they liked him a lot, and they tried to flip him a bunch of times. He wasn't having it. But no, they're not on the same level as Michigan and Ohio State. That we definitely agree on. But I definitely think they're a good, and trust me, it pains me to say this because I've lived in Pennsylvania around a lot of Penn State fans, but they're a good program. They're just not where Ohio Sate and Michigan are. And
I'm curious to see as like the Matt Rules of the world kind of get entrenched in like a Nebraska, because that is my biggest thing about Penn State is that. So if Nebraska starts bridging that gap a little bit, right, and then it comes down to James Franklin versus Matt Rule, for instance, I mean, it's just kind of
right.
That's a little bit of a difference maker for me.
Well, and look what happened last year, Ryan, when Michigan State had that team that actually had legit NFL players on it. Because didn't Kenny Walker play a bunch in the NFL this year?
Oh yeah, he was good this year. He played for like almost 1,000 yards. Yeah.
And they had that other receiver that left. Did he get drafted? He got drafted, right? The kid that came out last year, I can't remember if he did or but they had some NFL players. Because
Speedy Naylor was Jalen Naylor last year.
Yeah,
right?
I think so. But then then they had legit talent last year, and look what happens. They beat Penn State, right? I mean, it always happens, right? If they play a team that has talent that's on their level and it's coached well, they lose a lot. And like Michigan and Penn State have had this weird back and forth where Penn State tends to always win at home, and Michigan always tends to win at home. They had that different weird dynamic, but Michigan has kind of taken that one back over in recent years. Why? Because as much as I dislike Jim Harbaugh, and I don't think he did a good job in 2020, he's done a great job the last 2 years developing those teams.
No doubt.
And they're just a much better coach football team. I don't think Penn State had worse talent than Michigan did this year. I just think Michigan was a better team, just a better coach team. And they're gonna have a lot of talent. They're gonna have a lot of talent.
I still think Penn State's a gold mine if they get the right coach in there, because you can recruit there.
So that statement right there, Ryan, is exactly where you were. So yes, that tells me everything I need to know about why you did the shrugging your shoulders thing. It's not having faith in James Franklin, and I completely agree with you.
I mean, every year I have to watch guys like Brandon Smith come out where I'm just like, that kid's a freak, but he's not a good football player. Why is that? Why did that not happen? Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
And then the guys that are big time players were just, Saquon Barkley was that dude when he showed up at Penn State.
Jason Oweh. It's like, how is that kid not productive? How did you not do that? So,
and I thought that's a great point, because did he have a sack? He didn't have a sack in his last year.
No, he didn't.
It's insane. But the one position I thought they were doing a good job of producing well-coached players for a few years, and then that guy left, was wide receiver.
Yes.
Like Chris Godwin and KJ Hamler, like he was doing a good job of developing those guys. I can't remember who their receivers coach was. And then they just fired the guy that they replaced him with, Taylor Stubblefield. They just fired. So it's an interesting program. But yes, it is a program that if you hire the right coach, and it's interesting you bring up Matt Rule, Ryan, because that's a guy I know a lot of Penn State people kind of was hoping it would be their coach someday. Yep. And what does he do at Nebraska now? Because I look at him at Nebraska, Fickle at Wisconsin. We'll see what he does. But another one is Bielema at Illinois. If he can start recruiting, and he's already done a good job there, getting the Caden Fegan kid was a really nice pickup for them. Yep. Getting Melvin Eli. That's a basketball player.
Yes.
Getting Malik Elzy.
Malik Elzy.
So was a really nice. Now, did I want him at Notre Dame? No, but Michigan wanted him.
Yep.
He's a good football player. The key for them is going to be this. He's got to find a quarterback. It doesn't have to be a big-time guy. It could be a Cade McNamara. Look, honestly, Illinois, if they just had a Cade McNamara type, would be a good football team. I have a mailbag question for you, Ryan.
Okay.
Do you think Cade McNamara is a needle mover for Iowa?
For Iowa? Yes.
Yeah.
For Iowa, he is, in my opinion.
Okay, explain, because I was curious how you're going to see about that, because you and I have the same opinion of him as a talent.
Yeah.
But explain that.
Cade McNamara is a extremely dependable football player, not overly talented, but you can depend on him. He doesn't turn the football over, and he's careful with the ball overall, right? I mean, Iowa somehow still wins a decent amount of football games every year, and with Spencer Petras playing quarterback, right? And Spencer Petras
That's one of the worst Power 5 quarterbacks I've ever seen in my life.
He's awful, man. Somehow he got he got an all-star game invite to somebody. It's just like, okay, you're just he's 6'5" and white, and you're like, yep, that's a guy.
And has a big arm.
Yeah. Yes, he has a huge arm, no doubt. But I mean, really, what Iowa needed last year was they needed stability offensively, right? Because they were just so bad. And do I think Cade McNamara is going to upgrade them to be one of the best offenses in the Big Ten? No, I don't. But what I think that he's going to do is not turn the football over a ton and keep an offense regulated, right? Just keep it moving. Keep it moving. It might never be flashy. I don't think they're going to average like 35 points a game or anything like that, but it's going to be better than what it was. There's no doubt, because Cade McNamara has such a good baseline as a quarterback. Does he have a high ceiling? He does not, but his floor is substantially higher than what a Spencer Petras is at this point. And honestly, at Iowa, I don't need star quarterback play, man. I need a guy that just does a good job.
Exactly.
Keep it moving, man.
The baseline is
great defense.
The baseline is so, and I'll put it to like this. The talent gap between Keaton Slovis and Caleb Williams was not as great as the production gap was not as great as what the production gap will be between Spencer Petras and Cade McNamara.
Yep.
I mean, he was if Cade McNamara simply repeats what he did at Michigan in 2021, they are a much better team, because that defense was filthy this year.
Them and Iowa, man. It's two of the best defenses in college football last year. Not even just the Big Ten, man. They got dudes everywhere on both those defenses. I mean, Jack Campbell's going to get drafted relatively high. They have the defensive end, Lucas Van Nexus, that's going to be a first-round pick potentially. They have Riley Moss is probably going to be a draft pick playing corner. I mean, Illinois, I'll say this, Brian, if they could figure out their quarterback position and, kind of figure out the run game next year, I know that that's a tall task of one offseason. Illinois has got a lot of dudes coming back on defense, man. A couple of their best defensive linemen just announced that they're coming back this year as well. So those are two teams, man. If you can get just good offensive play, you don't need great offensive play at Illinois or Iowa. You need good offensive play with the defenses they're building. They could be contenders. Like, I really think at least in their side of the bracket, right? Do I think that they're going to win the Big Ten? It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that they're going to be a tough out and they're going to win some football games because they play tremendous defense. They just need solid offense.
Absolutely. We have some super chats here, Ryan. We'll get to here. We got one from Jay Clampin Investments. Very, very much. Appreciate that.
Jay says, here's some ad revenue. Love the coffee mug. Also, with the running back room stacked, do you see a pathway for Jeremiah Love seeing carries? Also, NFL playoff and Super Bowl picks. Thanks.
So first of all, Ryan, the mug he's talking about is Jay Clampett Investments is a Shamrock Club member. So he got a free mug. I'd show it to you, but it's only for Gold Club members. And I'm not a Gold Club member. But as I've said, it's a lot like our other mug, but it just has IB Club on it, which is, I think, pretty cool. So most people are starting to get those now. Do you see a pathway, Ryan, for Jeremiah Love getting carries? I do, certainly. Now, will he be the guy? I mean, first of all, I hope that Notre Dame's dominant enough this year that he's going to be able to play in 3 or 4 games. I mean, look, for me, there's a lot of guys in this class that may not play a ton, but there's just no point in redshirting him. Jeremiah Love's not a 5-year player. Jaden Greathouse is not a 5-year player. Braylon James is not a 5-year player. There's no need to not play them. Jaden Alsbury's not a 5-year guy. Drake Bowen's not a 5-year guy. Maybe Preston Zinter is. Christian Gray's not. Micah Bell's not. Maybe Adon Schuler is. Maybe Ben Minich is. Brandon Hillman's not. Play him. Some way, somehow, play him. So to me, every time I have a big lead, like Jeremiah Love should get 5-6 carries at least against Tennessee State.
Yeah.
Same against Central Michigan. And yeah, you want to get Jadarian Price in there as well. And we've had a lot of questions about his. I don't know where his recovery is. We'll see in the spring. I mean, I can tell you he's running and moving and doing drills and working out and all that. But
he's certainly doing upper body workouts.
Sure,
no doubt about that.
He hasn't missed curl day in a long time. But we won't know how he is from a football recovery standpoint until he puts the pads on and can go out there and play again. So we'll find out. But I mean, yeah, I see a pathway from getting carries, and then depending on how good he is. You may say, hey, dude, we got to find more of a home for this guy. But honestly, it's going to be a little hard for him to get a bunch of touches this year because he's walking into an offensive football team that, look, I get it. They weren't that good this year. They didn't score a lot this year. But there's a lot of talent on this offense, which is why I'm fired up about next year. So it'll be tough. But look, Jeremiah Love is also the flip side, Ryan. He's really good.
Yes.
And could be hard to keep off the field.
And he brings a dynamic that you are adding to this room soon, right? I mean, you have the thundering running style of an Audric Estime. You have the pretty smooth all-around game of a Logan Diggs, right? But he's still a bigger back at about 214 pounds. Chris Tyree brings explosiveness, but now you're bringing more into that room with Jeremiah Love and potentially Jadarian Price coming back from injury. So there's going to be some explosiveness that is added to the Notre Dame room. There's no doubt about it. And I think that he's a player for me, right? Like, Jay, to your question, it is a stacked running back room. So is he going to be able to be the guy? Like, most likely not in year one, right? I mean, it's not how it's kind of set up. But he's a guy that I think that you need to figure out how to get touches to, not only in that blowout situation, but like if there's an opportunity to get Jeremiah Love on kick or punt return, right, to maybe get him an occasional touch or get him in the passing game in a specialized role, from time to time. I think that he's the type of athlete that needs some type of volume, right? It's not going to be a whole volume because there's so many good running backs, but he's a player that I think is explosive and a guy that you need to try to get the football if you can. You need to try.
Last part of that one, Ryan, I'll just give the 2 matchups. You tell me who you got. It's the San Francisco 49ers at Philadelphia. The Eagles are 2.5-point favorites. Who you got, Ryan?
I probably take the Eagles. It pains me to say because I'm an Eagle hater, but I probably have to. I mean, I'll defer to Jalen Hurts over Brock Purdy. Like, ultimately, that's the breaker, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know who's going to win because I haven't watched the Eagles play this year. I just know I'm rooting for San Francisco. Number one,
I will also be rooting for San Francisco. Yes,
even as a non-Philadelphia Eagles hater, I've never liked the Eagles, never hated the Eagles. It's more about Mike Shanahan's kid, right? Kyle Shanahan. I mean, I've known about this kid since he was a teenager on the sidelines with his dad. You know what I mean? But also you've got McGlinchey there. You've got Aaron Banks there playing well for them. And I think it's I don't know. My grandpa was a favorite of that team too. So those are the reasons I'm rooting for it. But I think Jalen Hurts is a great story.
Yes.
I don't necessarily like the Eagles, but that kid leaves Bama because Tua beats him out, goes to Oklahoma, and then he's doing his thing in the NFL. Love it, and everything I've ever heard about Jalen Hurts is that he's a great kid.
Yes.
So I mean, just how he handled the whole thing with Tua, like he was Tua's biggest supporter, and all that stuff. But he just when the time came, he needed to go do what was best for him, and that was to go to Oklahoma and do what he needed to do. So I like him, but
he's also a kid that's gotten continuously better. Because I wasn't high on Jalen Hurts, but one thing I will say is even going back to the freshman year of Alabama. He's gotten pretty much better every single year since then. And like he hasn't really had too much stagnation. Like, yeah, he lost his job to Tua, right? But then he goes to Oklahoma, plays better. Rookie year, he's okay, but he gets better year 2, gets better year 3. Like he's just pretty much consistently gotten better, which tells me to back it up, right? Kid's a really hard worker. Like there's no doubt about it. And he grinds. So good for Jalen Hurts. I agree.
I will say this about the Niners, though, or the Eagles. One thing, I do not like their head coach. I don't like the Siriannis.
Rubs you the wrong way.
I don't like him or his brother.
He's got Dan Lanning vibes, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. He does. Yeah, I'm not a big fan. I call me old school, but I think coaches should act a certain way, and he doesn't, and I just don't like it. But, okay, so the other game, Ryan, is the Cincinnati Bengals at the Kansas City Chiefs. I will say this, as much as I like Josh Allen, and I think the Bills were a great story, I was glad that they didn't win last week because I would have been pissed if that game would have been played in Atlanta, because I think the NFL did that because they want to set up some sort of excuse to have championship games on neutral fields where they can sell, they can get into a bidding war for who's going to host the semifinals. That's, in my opinion, 100% why they did that. And I'm so glad they didn't get to have that opportunity, because if that would have been a packed stadium, packed house, all this other kind of stuff, then I'm like, hey, we can make some money off this.
Sure.
And I think that sucks. And it's one of the many reasons I dislike Roger Goodell. I don't know if there's a commissioner now that I like. I mean, I think they're all terrible. Maybe the hockey commissioner's good. I don't know. I don't know anything about hockey. But I can't stand Roger Goodell. So I'm glad the Bengals won for that regard. But you have the Cincinnati Bengals at the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are favored by only a point. Why? Because Joe Burrow is 3-0 against Pat Mahomes. So who you got, Mr. Roberts?
I think it goes to 4-0, man. I think the Bengals. I do. I think that the Bengals had the better football team just overall. I just really do. I think they had the better football team. I think they kind of have a little bit of chip on their shoulder after the way they lost last year in the Super Bowl and kind of coming close, and the Rams team beat them, obviously. But I think that they shored up the offensive line a lot better than it was last year, although they're dealing with an injury at left tackle right now. I think the defense is very good for Cincinnati quietly, like a really quality defense. Joe Burrow has taken that step to being one of the elite quarterbacks in the NFL and all the talent that he has around him. I think Cincinnati wins that football game. I do.
Here's my thing, Ryan. I feel like the offenses are very similar in talent. The Chiefs score a lot more because the style of play is more meant to be more. There's a big difference on defense. And the Chiefs have some individually very good players. I mean, Chris Jones is, when I watch him play, and it's not often, but I watch playoff football, he's turned into a pretty darn good football player.
Oh, he's a monster.
But their defense is just not good, not that good, not championship level. And to me, that's the reason he's 0-3, Pat Mahomes 0-3 against Joe Burrow, because it's not Pat Mahomes versus Joe Burrow. It's the Chiefs versus the Bengals.
Right. And
I just think that the Bengals, as you mentioned, the Bengals have the better defense, in my opinion. They make more stops. And I think that's the reason they're going to win. So it's just going to come down to the Chiefs defense making stops. I mean, look what happened in the fourth quarter this year. Bengals shut the Chiefs out. They went in the fourth quarter. The Bengals the Chiefs were winning, Ryan. It was 24-17. And why they lose? Because in the fourth quarter, Bengals outscored them 10-0. Simple as that. Right? The Bengals defense made stops and the Chiefs couldn't. And that's the deal. So, and then, of course, there's the ankle injury. It was funny. Somebody put a video of like him walking off the stage at a recent press conference. He's like walking off fine. And I was just like, he got into that lock into the hallway. He's like, oh my God, that hurt so bad.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I had to walk like a champ, but I'm in so much pain right now. But, yeah, I mean, I just think the all-around supporting cast in Cincinnati, I can't believe I'm saying this. The supporting cast in Cincinnati for the Bengals is really good. I mean, they've done a great job building that. They really have. Yeah. They have not wasted any of their top picks recently. I mean, they've hit on almost all of them, right? I mean, can you think of a top pick, like top 3-round pick, honestly, that hasn't hit to some degree? I mean, for the most part, they've had a great track record in recent years.
The Jackson Carman pick hasn't been great.
Yeah,
but
that's
otherwise,
true.
You're right.
What round did they get him in?
I think second round.
Second round? Okay.
Yeah.
But that's what year? He's in year what, 2?
I think year 2
for him.
He's starting at left tackle right now because Jonah Williams got hurt.
He has not been okay. I'll say that one.
Yeah.
So he's not a bum.
No, he's fine.
But he is not what you'd expect from a guy that was picked as high as he was picked. But he's still a starting left tackle. But like Dax Hill had a pretty good year this year, right?
I'm not sure about that one.
For a rookie, He's playing for him
Not
though,
sure.
right? I mean, he's playing for
I
him.
think I haven't really
Cam
kept
Britt
up with
Taylor,
him.
I believe, plays for him.
He's a good player.
Right.
Britt Taylor's a good player.
Last
Taylor
year
Britt.
they got Jamar Chase, right? That's or
Pretty good
2021
player.
they got Jamar Chase, pretty good. Jackson Carman, like you said, not great. How's Joseph Osai been? Is he doing anything for him?
He's just a rotational pass rusher for him. So
you got Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Logan Wilson the year before that.
It's pretty
That's
good.
been a pretty good hit. The year before that, first 3 rounds was Jonah Williams, not a star, not
player,
playing
though.
like you'd expect the number 11 overall pick, but he's a starting left tackle. Yep. Drew Sample, I don't know if he's played for him this year, Ryan, you'd know, but I mean, he played for him a bunch last year as a blocker.
I just know their number 1 tight end is Hayden Hurst.
Yeah,
that's all I know
but
about the tight end
he blocked a lot from last year. He's more of a blocker type, and which is why I never understood why he was winning the second round. And then Jermaine Pratt in the second round. Yeah. Here's a guy I wanted to ask you about. How is Michael Jordan playing for them at all?
I don't think so. Oh, I think Michael Jordan's terrible. I think.
Yeah, I never understood that one. He got a ton of hype coming out of college. But I just was going through their draft picks. But they have hit really, really well in recent years. Like really well. Their success rate is really good. Here's a guy that I hadn't don't know. Is Tyler Shelvin still with them? How's he doing? I haven't noticed him.
He might be a rotational player, maybe. DJ Reader is their dude inside. He is one of the better D tackles.
The kid from Clemson?
Yes, he's a stud, man. Stud.
Is he the one that kind of had to step away from the team back in 2015? He was having some. I think that was him. He had to step away from the team for a few weeks and then bounce back, came back strong. Yeah, he was a good player, man. Clemson has produced some dudes up front, man.
He is. DJ Reader is one of the best I've ever seen of anchoring against double teams, man. Like, he just can't get moved off his spot. Mm-hmm. It is insane.
John Ross was one that was a weird, like I just can't believe how bad he was. Right, he's not even with them anymore, right?
I don't even know if he's in the NFL anymore. He might not even be in the NFL.
How do you not make in the NFL with 4.22 speed? Some other draft picks obviously have hit the 2018 class. Billy Price has been banged up a lot. Is he healthy and playing for them, or is he kind of
I think he's on a different team now.
Okay,
he's on a different team.
But then you've got Jesse Bates has been a good player for them.
Great
you got
player.
Sam Hubbard for them. Here's one of the biggest busts I've ever seen as a big time linebacker that I just thought was going to be really, really good. Malik Jefferson. I feel like Malik Jefferson got drafted off his high school ranking because there's nothing he did for the Longhorns that projected top 3 round pick. And of course,
so talented,
he was really not good. I don't think he's with them anymore.
I don't think he's in the NFL anymore.
Yeah, he got cut by the Bengals really early, like really early. So I'm rooting for the Bengals just because I'm still a Broncos fan. I haven't completely given them up on it yet. So as much as I like Pat Mahomes, the people around him annoy me, and I can't root for the Chiefs. But I do like Andy Reid. I think so. Andy Reid has always struck me as this like really serious guy, right? Like growing up. Then you kind of find out he's kind of a goofball as you get older. You feel like he wears Hawaiian shirts and stuff like that. But his State Farm commercials with Pat Mahomes are frigging hilarious. Did you see that where he's drawing?
Did you see his conversation this past week at a press conference about going to Germany next year? Did you? So someone asked him, or he brought it up, I think. He was like, "Yeah, man, I just can't wait to go to Germany so I can get a good bratwurst." I was like, what the heck is wrong with you, man?
What? All right. Sure.
It was like when they won the Super Bowl and they asked him what he was going to do next. He's like, I'm going to go get a cheeseburger.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
He's a funny dude, man. Like, I just love the fact where Pat Mahomes like, coach, it happened again. And he's got the marker and he's like, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. It's just really funny. I don't know why I find it so funny. Because I think partly because I've always assumed he was just this really serious guy for so long.
Yeah.
And so it's really
he's not a serious guy.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Yeah, it's hilarious, man.
Offensive genius, though. You know what's the best thing about Andy Reid? Have you ever seen the punt pass kick competition that he was in when he was a little kid?
Mm-mm.
Oh, I remember those. Look this up, man. It's so funny. I mean, I feel like we should like play it right now on this show. It is that funny. It is hysterical.
I may look it up. We'll have to see. Yeah.
Please do. I guarantee it's the first thing on YouTube. It's like Andy Reid punt pass kick, and it'll pop right up. I swear. It's so funny.
Brandon Plensner said, "You mean you're not cheering for Ian Book and the Eagles, Brian?" the little LOL there. First of all, I didn't even realize that Ian Book was on the Eagles. That's how much I care about Ian Book's professional career. But if the Eagles win it all, it's going to be like, see, Ian Book's just a winner. That's what people are going to say.
Like, wow, no career attempts for the Eagles, but great player.
You know that's going to happen. It's going to happen. All right, let's get back up here to some of these questions here, Ryan. Let's get back to the top.
From John A1, it seems the powers of the Big Ten aren't using acquisition fees in recruiting. Has the talent gap grown between the SEC and Southern schools because of this?
Oh boy, I don't know. I mean, here's my thing. Everybody keeps talking about how. Here's the thing that annoys me, Ryan, and it's kind of like this whole. Well, Notre Dame didn't get Keon Keeley and Peyton Bowen because of NIL. Like, well, what makes you say that? Well, because they lost him and it's because of NIL. And I was like, well, when has Notre Dame ever gotten a Keon Keeley? So what was the reason before? It's like nothing's changing. You just now have a new boogeyman to point to as the reason why it's changing.
Right.
And SEC dominates recruiting. Yeah, that's always been the case.
Because a lot of talent comes from the South.
Yeah.
I mean,
again, I point back to, I don't care what anybody says. This is the best Notre Dame recruiting class they've had in a decade. It just is. I don't care what the rankings say. You can rank it however you want. I really don't care. I just watched 247 just released their new top 100. Or top 247 or whatever. And you're just looking at it, you're like, this is just so stupid. And it's not even just Notre Dame guys. Like they have Jason Moore in the 70s. And you just look at it, you're like, that dude's not even the top 100. Not even Notre Dame guys. This is dumb. This is just so useless. It's getting worse and worse and worse to where the rankings just stop mattering anymore. But yeah, okay.
Was
guess
it
what,
true
Ryan?
that I didn't look at that recent ranking? Was it true that Brendan Vernon wasn't in the top 247 now? Apparently,
No,
247.
He's not.
That's insane, man.
No, he's not.
It's insane.
So you just look at it and you're just like, I just stopped caring about these things, and so yeah, okay, they won the rankings wars, but look, here's the deal: Ohio State landed a really good class. Notre Dame landed a really good class. Penn State landed another really good class. Yep. Oklahoma landed a really good class. Is it as good as people rank it? No, but it's a really good class. Oregon landed a really good class. Texas landed a really good class. So I would actually argue that non-SEC schools gained on the SEC this year. Well, Alabama always does that. Everybody's freaking out about this Alabama. This is no different than any other Alabama class. And so they got 9 5-stars. No, they didn't. They got 9 guys that were ranked as 5 stars. They didn't land 9 guys that are actually 5-star players because a lot of those guys weren't ranked high until Alabama went after them.
Sure.
And so I point this out every year. Alabama did what they do every year. They're phenomenal at recruiting players. Georgia did what they do every year. But the thing is, the other schools got even better.
Yes.
And so that's the difference. Well, Alabama recruited an X number. Does anyone want to tell me that Alabama didn't have the most talented roster in the country last year? Does anybody want to really try to tell me that? What happened? Does anyone want to tell me that they didn't have a better roster than Tennessee or LSU or Texas A&M? Of course they did. Or Texas? Of course they did. But it's not always about that. So Alabama's just doing what they always do, right? But Texas got better. Oregon got better talent-wise. Oklahoma got better. Notre Dame got better. Ohio State's still doing their thing. Penn State keeps getting better. So I think the gap is closing, in my opinion. And the reason why, Ryan, because not every kid cares about the acquisition. Look, not every kid cares about that. And I know some of you are just going to ignore that I'm saying this. And it's fine. Whatever. It is what it is. But not every kid cares about that. They don't. There's plenty of Jaden Rashadas out there, but there's also plenty of Jeremiah Loves and Jaden Greathouses and Charles Jagasals and Drake Bowens and Jaden Ospreys and Christian Grays and Braylon Jameses and guys like that. Look, Ohio State's not paying big bucks for kids, the acquisition fees, and yet they still got Brandon Ennis out of Florida. They still got Noah Rogers out of North Carolina. They still got good players because not every kid cares about that, right? As far as you got to pay me up front to do X. And so it's just not what people make. It's just the new boogeyman, Ryan, and it used to be this or that. There was always some excuse for why the SEC recruits very well. They've been doing this for 20 years, and so I don't get that. I don't get that fired up about it. So
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, hold on one second. Let me see here real fast. Hold on a second. Might be having some news here soon. All right, so let's go to the next question here. Got some really good questions here today. We did have a couple super chats, and let me find one here. Here go from Tyler Evans.
From Tyler Evans, who will be the next Notre Dame player in the NFL Hall of Fame, in your opinion? I mean, is there anybody that has just recently retired that would be that guy, Brian? Because like the first two guys that came to mind were Zach Martin was one that came to. I mean, he's a slam dunk Hall of Famer. Like there's no doubt. He's one of the best guards to ever play football. Harrison Smith, I think, will get in eventually, but I don't know if he's like a first ballot guy. I think Zach Martin, though, is like the minute he's eligible, he's in the Hall of Fame. Like there's no doubt about it. Like he's a no doubter.
I mean, because now that Bryant Young's in and Jerome Bettis is in,
I feel like Ricky Waters is one, but like I just don't
should
think
be in my opinion.
He should be in. Yeah. I feel like some people don't like his personality, so they're not going to vote him in though. Like that's just
I get that. Yeah. But look, if you're going to have Lawrence Taylor in, then personality shouldn't really matter about it. Ricky Waters was a darn good football player.
No doubt.
And the other thing too is he did it over a period of time. He didn't do it in an era where it was like he did it over the course of 30 years, right? He's one of the top 25 rushers of all time. Yes. And he also had a lot of receiving yards, a lot of receiving yards and during his career. So, and here's the other thing, he's a champion. Right? He's a Super Bowl champ. He won a championship with the 49ers. So he had, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years of 1,000 yards rushing. So he had 10,643 rushing yards. And during his career, he had 4,248 receiving yards during his career. So he had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years of over 400 receiving yards and 2 years over 600 receiving yards. So you're talking about a guy that's got 16,000, almost 15,000 total yards of offense. That's a Hall of Fame career, in my opinion.
Yeah,
and he retired at 32.
Yeah,
right.
And he won multiple Super Bowls, right?
One, right, with the Niners. I think he just won the one with the Niners. That would be because he was with the Niners for 3 years, won a Super Bowl, and then he was with the Eagles and Seahawks after that.
Yeah,
and I don't think. When did the Seahawks? The Seahawks didn't win a Super Bowl during that tenure? They didn't win one
on the team. No.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the team with Hasselbeck, but that was after him. But that team didn't win it; they lost to the Steelers.
They lost. Yep.
So he just had the one with the Niners. So yeah, but I think you're right, Ryan. It's here's the thing: how far apart, regarding the Zach Martin, Harrison Smith deal, how far apart do they retire? That would be the other thing. Like, let's say Harrison Smith retires in a year because he's getting up there in age a little bit. Well, Zach Martin, as an offensive lineman, could play for another 8, 9, 10 years.
He could.
Look at Andrew Whitworth, right? 10 might be stretching it. Where Harrison Smith, like once Harrison Smith loses a step as a defensive back, you're kind of done. I mean, your lifespan is not the same. I mean, unless you were a freaky speed guy like a Rod Woodson who could lose a step and still be a 4.4. You know what I mean? Like Darrell Green could lose 3 steps and he's still a 4.4. Did
I ever tell you that I have a Darrell Green story? I think you would like this.
Okay.
So my high school head coach actually was so he played at NC State and then he was a undrafted free agent the same year that Darrell Green came out. So he was with the Redskins at the time. And they used to run 40-yard dashes to end the practice or whatever. And they used to time them. He said that, so my coach ran 4.4 flat coming out of college. Like he was a very fast player. He had to run against Darrell Green, and he said Darrell Green beat him by 5 yards on a 40-yard dash, and he ran a 4.4 flat 40. Like just to put that in context, Darrell is stupid fast. Fast, man.
They used to have these. I don't know if you ever saw them, Ryan.
Fastest man.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he would just smoke people. I mean, there was one. I'm trying to remember. He was racing Herschel Walker one year. Herschel Walker could fly. He just smoked him. You're just like, this guy's insane. This guy's. I read somewhere that he on his 50th birthday he went out and ran a 40-yard dash and ran a 4.5.
That's
I
wild.
read that somewhere. He just wanted to see how fast he could still run, and he ran a 4.5 at 50. At 50, it's nuts. He was so fast, so fast, and a really good guy from everything I've ever read and heard about him. So.
You know what they need to do, Brian? They need to get rid of the Pro Bowl altogether because they're turning into a flag football thing now.
It's ridiculous.
They need to get rid of it, and they need to bring back the fastest man competition.
The skills competitions, yeah.
Yes. You remember when Larry Allen used to dominate the bench press every
and they had the
year?
quarterback things where it's like John Elway and
do that,
Dan
man.
Marino. There's one year literally in that skills competition where it's Dan Marino, Brett Favre, Joe Montana, and John Elway were all in it. Like, that's freaking awesome. You know,
I used to watch it every year, man. You need to just bring back the skills competition, get rid of the you can still vote for the Pro Bowl. That's cool, whatever.
Just have all pros. I mean, why do we need all pros and Pro Bowlers? You know what I mean? You've got your all pros, and then bring back the competition, and then give them some money if the winner gets some money. You know, because that's about the only thing you can do to convince them to come out and do it.
And more guys will be willing to participate in those things because there's less opportunity for injury, right?
Yeah.
Like they'll be like, "Yeah, I'll play. That's cool.
Bring back the fastest man competition like they used to have. You know, that'd be a lot of fun.
You remember when they used to have the retired players play in those flag football games or whatever? Mm-hmm. That was fun.
That'd be fun. That'd be a lot of fun. I'd love to see that. See John Elway's old tail getting out there trying to sling that thing around. That'd be a lot of fun. Like, no, this isn't the retired players we had in mind, John. Sorry. We're not trying to get anybody hurt. You have a super chat here from Tommy Guns. Appreciate that, Tommy, very, very much. Here's another super chat here from Adam Shipley. Ryan, this is kind of what we talked about earlier. Thank you for the super chat, Adam, very, very much. He's running and moving and going through drills and all that. It's just, I don't know if he's where he is from a football standpoint in that regard. So, again, he's definitely getting healthier. I just don't know when he's going to be ready to be, going out there and kind of going through, putting the pads on and going through that kind of stuff.
Right.
So, yep. So here we go.
Hopefully he gets back because he's dynamic.
Yes, he's really good. He's really good. Here's an interesting one from Irish Blooded, Ryan.
If you could pick your players and scheme, what type of offense, defense would you pick for your team? Am I assuming this is the Notre Dame roster that I'm picking for, or is this just what team I'm picking for?
Maybe, I'm not sure. Yeah, I would just kind of say, let's just go kind of big picture, okay, so me, I'm more of a pro style guy. So I've always said I'm an inside and outside zone guy. I want to have some linemen that can move people, but also have some decent athleticism. So you've already got some guys that fit that pretty well. My offense would be more Logan Diggs, Chris Tyree-ish than Audric Estime-ish from just a style of play personally. Audric Estime is a very talented back. It's just everybody fits different offenses. And there's a reason why. I'll be honest, one of my biases has always been, Ryan, big receivers. I've always had a bias towards big receivers because the offense that I like, that I'd want to run, thrives with big receivers. It's a one-on-ones. It's being able to throw back shoulders because I like to run the football. And I want guys that can win one-on-ones. And I don't want guys that have to rely on precise route running every time and speed to win one-on-ones. I like guys that are open even when they're not open, and so that's always been kind of my preference for that. And defensively, I grew up as a 4-3 guy. I've fallen in love with the 4-2-5.
Yes.
Especially if you can find a guy like a Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. That's the big key for me, is finding a Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah type. And then give me some Cam. I mean, look, honestly, for my preferred type of defense, Notre Dame has several guys in the secondary that fit what I would want as my ideal defense. I was watching the Clemson game again last night. They played Benjamin Morrison and press man almost the entire game, and just said, "I dare you to throw it at him." And Clemson kept throwing at him. I mean, not just the 2 picks around, but they kept trying to throw deep on him. And every time he's playing on the high shoulder, and it's just great coverage. And I think Cam Hart fits what I like a lot as well, and so does Xavier Watts. I like rangy, athletic guys that I can play man coverage with, but also have the type of tackling ability where I can mix up zones as well. And so in that regard, they've got a lot of guys like that I really like, honestly, for Notre Dame. So what about you?
Defensively, we see it very similarly. I've always been a 4-2-5 guy. I fell in love with Gary Patterson back in the day as far as just kind of researching how he runs his defense. Umbrella coverage, being able to play some cloud, but rotate down. Like, there's a lot of cool things that Gary Patterson did with the 4-2-5. And I also love it too because it's so easy to use multiple personnel, right? Like you could run 4-3 personnel out of a 4-2-5. You could run a true nickel out of a 4-2-5 as well. And it's just so diverse what you can do out of a 4-2-5, which is why I love it tremendously. So we see 4-2-5 very different, very similarly as far as why I think it kind of draws to us. Offensively, I'm not Irish, but if I had to prefer, I am also more of a pro style guy like Brian is. But I honestly, I'm just not as religious in what I believe offensively. I'm not. Like I know defensively what I like and what I think is successful, but I was always more of a defensive guy, right? For me, it's whatever fits the team that you have surrounding it, right? So I'm not as hamstrung on offensively. I want to run this. I want to run that. I don't want to run this. Like I'm a little bit of a compromiser on the offensive side of the football, but I am definitely more pro style. But 4-2-5 defensively, easy money. Like that's my jam. That's my jam because I just think cycling between a base defense and a nickel is so easy out of a 4-2-5 alignment. You can do so many great things.
Yep. Let's see here. Notre Dame 2164 has another question for us, Ryan.
If the Notre Dame defensive line reaches its potential this year, where will the defense be ranked? What about the linebackers? What if both reach their potential?
If the D-line reaches its potential this year, I think Notre Dame, where will the defense be ranked? I think it's a clear top 10 to 15 defense, if not top 10, right? I would go towards top 10.
Out of the defensive line and linebackers, Brian, which one do you think is most impactful for them reaching their ceiling? Easily?
D-line.
Not even close. Yeah.
Easily. You play linebacker. Yeah. You could be an okay linebacker and be very productive if your D-line is just killing people. And we've seen that at Notre Dame. And to me, you could be also, Ryan, you could also be a really good linebacker, but if your defensive line is getting eaten up, perfect example, go watch the first half of the Pitt game in 2012. No Lewis Nix. And Pitt's just getting up to Manti and chopping them the whole first half as they jump out to a lead. Then they put Nix back in the second half because he's banged up, and Manti goes off, and Pitt couldn't move the ball anymore. And that's not to say Manti wasn't a great player, but a great linebacker needs the defensive line to do its job and do it well. And the other thing too is with this particular team, I think the highest upside for what this team could be is still up front. So what does it look like reach its potential? Okay, Botelho and Burnham show up, show out. But Baptiste is a guy. Riley Mills takes that leap as a big-time player. Gabriel Rubio takes a big jump now in year 3 and becomes a force at the nose, right? That would be something I would look at. Alexander Ahrensberger kind of flashes. Tyson Ford has a big year 2 jump, right? And so that's what that's some disruptive, long, talented dudes stepping up and playing right there. And, Sean Davis and I were talking about this the other day, and I don't know if he said it on one of his Lucky Lefty podcast shows, but we were just talking about, he was saying that, like, if the D-line, if the pass rush for this team shows up, and he thinks it will, this team's going to be hard to beat. Because if the pass rush shows up and you have to get rid of the ball quickly, you're going to turn it over a lot with this secondary. A lot. And I think he's absolutely right. So if the linebacker, to me, Ryan, it's like this. If the linebackers are solid and the D-line's great, they'll have a better defense than if the D-line is solid and the linebackers are great. Both are good. Both will be top 15 defenses, I think. But when the D-line is playing to its potential, it's a top 10 defense. And so give me elite defense, solid linebacker play over the other way around. I just think the thing is the talent is there for them both to be really flipping good this year. It's just, will they be maximized or not? That's going to be the question.
I guess my main question is, so spurning, and I know it's going to be a different group, obviously, right? Like this isn't 2022 anymore. But in my opinion, and let me know if you disagree with this, but the defensive line in 2022, in my opinion, was solid. It was solid to good most of the year, right?
Solid overall, had a couple flashy moments. Like
exactly.
They took over the second half of the Cal game, right?
Yes.
They had a couple games. They were really good against North Carolina.
Yeah.
But those were just kind of Clemson. They were really good against. They had about four games this year where where it's for stretches they took the game over.
Yep.
But they weren't consistently as good. They also had some stretches where like, dude, what are they doing?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so for me, it's like they're a solid unit with flashes of good, right? Linebackers, I would say, were below average for most of the years with flashes of solid, right? Like, so I think that the defensive line performed better than the linebackers mostly in 2022. So I guess my question would be for you, Brian, is where I was trying to come from. It is if you had the same group of linebacker play last year and you had great defensive line play, or you had the solid defensive line and great linebacker play, does that switch the conversation for you at all, or is it still defensive line? They still
It depends on who my D coordinator is. If I have a
Sure.
defensive coordinator that's not so focused on his scheme, then he would make a change at will.
Right.
But I would still always go with the elite D line. Yeah, I'd always go with the elite D line just because they'll make up some of those mistakes.
Sure.
I just feel that they will. And now, if you were to ask me a good solid D line and the linebacking core plays to its potential, would I feel this defense is going to be really good? Yeah, it'll still be really good because there's things you can do with a blitz scheme that you can kind of overcome the fact you don't have any great pass rushers up front. But at the end of the day, that's the reason it comes down to for me, Ryan, is because if you don't have a really good D line, it's much harder to generate a pass rush without blitzing. And I think when you have to generate a pass rush, when you have to generate a pass rush by blitzing because you have to, not because you want to, you're just going to be more vulnerable to giving up big plays.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Yep. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. Good question. We got some really good questions today, guys and gals.
From John A1, if Riley Mills, moves back inside and Aiden Keanaaina does indeed make a full recovery, what is the projected starting defensive line in 2023? I mean, for me, Brian, inside, I still think it's Howard Cross and Riley Mills potentially, right? Howard Cross at nose, Riley Mills at 3 tech. And then defensive line wise, you're talking about, potentially Javonte Jean-Baptiste at big ends. And then you're talking about Jordan Botelho or Joshua Burnham at Viper kind of doing some switch duty, right? Maybe some Junior Tuilamaka in there. I mean, I don't know if you agree or disagree or see something different, but that's kind of my initial impulse on it.
Yeah, if Aiden Keanaaina is fully healthy and on the team, I still don't think it changes anything as far as who starts. It's going to be Riley Mills and Howard Cross inside as starters, and it's going to be Javonte Jean-Baptiste and Jordan Botelho at Viper as the starters. It's now a perfect world scenario for me would be that they convince Howard Cross to not start because I think having Riley Mills at nose tackle and Howard Cross kind of being a hybrid 3 nose, 3 nose, 3 nose, where you're limited his reps to 30 to 35 snaps a game is better for him. I mean, he's better when he can play fewer snaps. I don't know if he'll believe that or not, or if he wants to hear that or not, but he just is. It's been true his entire career. And with a guy like that, Ryan, if you don't start him, then you don't start his play clock as soon. And then he can kind of mix up and play both of those positions. And so that to me is where I would that's where I would kind of go with that one. Sure. That'd be my stance on that one, Ryan. But I don't think Keanaaina breaking out has any bearing on who starts.
Yeah.
He'd have being healthy.
It would be really nice for depth,
yeah.
But
yeah. Yeah. I mean, now he'd have to get healthy and then somehow have a huge breakout for that to be the case.
Sure.
Him just being healthy. I think Gabriel Rubio is the more talented player, and he's also 300 pounds. So I mean that'd be the nose that I would. Now he played a lot of 3 technique last year, but I think Gabriel needs to be inside, and I think another year in a weight room would be is going to be very big for him, in my opinion. Very big for him.
Well, and I would say, Gabriel Rubio is a guy that I feel like we need to talk about more because he could really help the D line.
He was a redshirt freshman last year. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And he got better and better and better.
Yeah.
He had some ups and downs early. He'd stop moving his feet and get, knocked on his butt because he's a kid that never played against anyone that could knock him on his butt before. You know what I mean? Like the only person he's ever lined up against in his life until he went to college that could knock him on his butt was his dad. You know what I mean? Who was an NFL offensive lineman for a little bit. So, he learned from it. Hey, I don't care how big you are and good you are. You can't stop your feet. You got to keep moving. Or if you're going to stop your feet, better anchor. So
Right.
he learned his lesson, and you didn't see that happening moving forward. So yeah, Ryan, I thought he got better and better every year. I think he's a guy, and he was a highly ranked guy and talented kid. He just learning, and
Yes.
I think he's got a chance to be a breakout guy this year. I think people forget that he's a young kid. I mean, I don't know what it is. Like if guys don't ball out by their first or second year, we kind of write them off,
Right.
but I don't know why we're not talking more about Gabriel Rubio. I think you're absolutely
Agree.
right. Absolutely right, Ryan. Here's another one from John A1.
What front seven personnel group would be the most schematically capable without subbing between base 4-2-5, 3-3-5? I think it's 4-2-5 personally. I mean,
I think it depends on the team, depends on the personnel.
Oh, Notre Dame, do you think it depends?
Just in general, I think,
yeah.
Because to me, it's like if I have a Von Miller type of outside linebacker, then I'm going to primarily be a 4-2-5 team, right? I don't want him dropping into coverage. If I'm a 3-4 team that has more of a Will Anderson's in the same category, can he drop into coverage? Sure, but why? And that'd be more of a 4-down type of look. But if I've got if my best outside linebackers, my best Vipers are the Jordan Patelho, Josh Burnham types, like a Notre Dame, or project that to another team, then I think that's more of a 3-3-5 type of situation to be, because then we're talking about what allows you to be most multiple. I think a hybrid linebacker, Ryan, can be more multiple than a hybrid defensive end, I guess is the way that I look at it. You know what I mean? And so, but it just, so much of it depends on who your personnel is. I know what I prefer, me personally, I prefer the 4-2-5 with a really athletic guy, Viper, that can move around a little bit. But but I also see the merit to being a 3-3-5 depending on who your personnel is. I mean, Jordan Patelho was playing Viper in 2021. I mean, Rover in 2021. Don't ask him to be Isaiah Foskey. So yeah, that's that's kind of where we're at. So Here's another one from Irish Blooded, kind of related to that, Ryan. With Jean Baptiste on the roster now, who would you want where on your front seven? I mean, we kind of talked a lot about that already. To me, though, the only change that I would add, since he said front seven, is I would still like to see them move to a more 3-3-5 or 4-2-5. I want to see them move to a traditional 4-2-5 or a traditional 3-3-5 based on the personnel. I just don't think Notre Dame has the personnel right now, unless they're going to move Jalen Snead out to Rover, to be a 3 linebacker team, in the sense of where one of them is a true linebacker as opposed to one of them being a Viper. Well, so
And I think with the personnel Notre Dame has, to your original point, whether you're talking about Joshua Burnham or Jordan Patelho or Junior Tuihalamaka, it's good. I think it's going to be kind of easy for Notre Dame potentially to cycle between a 4-2-5 and a 3-3-5. Like it's only it's a one player adjustment in that situation, right? And then when you want to go nickel, it's just like, okay, well, we're 4-2-5 nickel base. Like that's kind of what we want to move to, right? So I think that you can be I think it's easily adjustable to go from a 4-2-5 to a 3-3-5 in this instance with what you have. It's not as easy when you had Isaiah Foskey playing Viper, for instance, right? But when you have Jordan Patelho playing Viper, it's I think relatively easy to move from a 4-2-5 to a 3-3-5 on a snap-to-snap basis, just because you have a little bit more of a versatile player comparative to just a dominant pass rusher in a Isaiah Foskey, or a dominant edge player, I should say.
Right.
Maybe not. Yeah.
Here's an interesting one, Ryan, from Logan Thayer. Who are Notre Dame's best 11 players on offense this season, ignoring position? So when we say best, let's go with a combination of talent plus what type of production we think they're capable of at their position this year. So not like, hey, I think Braylon James is one of the most talented, physically gifted guy.
Yeah.
But where is he in his development at this point in time?
Sure.
Right.
So let's go for 2023 is basically too.
Yeah. So best, I think I like how he said best, not most talented.
Sure.
So I think best incorporates all of that. So that's where I want to be at, Ryan. So who are the best? I mean,
Joe Alt's number one, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think Joe Alt and Blake Fisher are no-brainers in the top 11.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think that right now I would have any other linemen in my top 11. right now. Although a Billy Schrauth, a Ty Chan, a Charles Jagasol could potentially jump into that if they're able to kind of figure the offense out and get the technique. Because again, we're going best, not most physically gifted.
Yeah.
So, but for now, that's where I'd be.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that it's a to be determined on the rest of the offensive line. You have Joe Alt, you have Blake Fisher. I think those are pretty easy ones. I would say I'd have at least 2 running backs in that top 11, right? I mean, Audric Estime, Logan Diggs for sure. Chris Tyree dependence, but I think 2 running backs is where I would settle just initially starting the list, and we'll kind of fill it out, right?
If Tyree is used correctly, he's absolutely in that conversation for me. But that's why he's a little bit of an asterisk, I think, Ryan, for me, is because I don't know if they're going to use him correctly.
Yes.
But if they used him correctly, I would have him. And then the other one would be if I knew that Jadarian Price was going to be healthy, he'd be in there for me.
Sure.
And I'm not putting any freshmen in this list, by the way. I need to see them in a college uniform first for me. You can put them if you want, but for me, I need to see him in a college uniform first.
Sam Hartman's a no-brainer, right? Sam Hartman's a no-brainer.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I've got 2 quarterbacks in there.
You have Buckner in there too?
Buckner is one of your most dynamic football players. And I think he'd do some really special things this year if they didn't land Sam Hartman. Now, I don't know if he can consistently do it, which is why you bring in Sam Hartman, but I think he's in that conversation. I may kind of bump him out here as I kind of go through the other list. Well, let me ask you this. Are any tight ends in your top 11 right now?
I think Mitchell Evans might be able to sneak in at 11. I honestly would have to write it down, though. I mean, they're definitely not in the higher part of the list. There's no doubt. I mean, it's just too much. I just have too many questions right now from an all-around perspective. I think Mitchell Evans will be a good player, but just how good, I think, is where I'm a little stuck on. How many wide receivers would you have on your list? That's a good question.
For sure, 3. Yeah. For sure, 3. The guy I'm leaving off that we're not thinking of is right now would be Lorenzo Styles, because talent-wise, there's no doubt he belongs on that list. It's Thomas, Colsey, and Merriweather for me.
I agree there. Yeah. So that's 8 for me, 9 for you because you have Buckner, right?
Correct.
Yep. So we have
I have Tyree as well.
And you have Tyree. So you have 10. Yeah. So you need
No, I have 9. I have Alt, Fisher, Diggs, Estime, Tyree, Hartman, Buckner, Thomas, Merriweather, Colsey.
Okay. So far I have
10. I counted 9.
You have 10.
Is 10.
I have 8 because I didn't have Tyree and I left off Buckner for now just because I want to see how it fills out. So I'm at 8 at the moment.
It's hard not to put Styles on there, but like just the way he played this year, he's got to show me a ton. I would have Mitchell Evans on there just because I'm projecting a little bit with him. I just think that now that he's going to have another full year of the offseason, he's not – last offseason would have been huge for him because he wasn't healthy. He got hurt in spring, I think, right? Or was it the winter?
Yes.
But he missed a bunch of development time, and that's a former converted quarterback that needed that physical development time in a weight room. He's going to get that because if you looked at him this year, Ryan, he has no definition to speak of whatsoever, none. Wherein you look at Michael Mayer and he's like yoked up and he's all jacked up, and you look at Eli Raridan and he's all jacked up, and Holden Stace has got some definition. Then you got Mitchell Evans, so it's like now this offseason, I think it's going to be a little bit different.
He's a big kid, man. Yeah. Naturally, just a big kid.
But he's a pretty good athlete for his size. He's not an explosive athlete, but he's a smooth athlete,
Yeah.
And so I don't have any reason to back this up. I mean, he caught 3 passes last year. I get it. But I have Tobias on here who caught 1.
At least Mitchell caught the 3 passes in his lone starts of the season, right?
and it was open a few more times where he could have got the ball. I'm going to say I'm projecting a little bit on that one and going to go with Mitchell Evans.
I think I would end up having Mitchell and Tyler Buckner in my top 11 now that I'm going through the numbers. So I'm at 10. My last spot, man, is just tough. I mean, I would like to get Tyree in there. I'm thinking about Lorenzo Styles. I'm even thinking about Zeke Correll, to be honest. I'm thinking about it. It's just I'd probably put Zeke Correll just because he's a little more known commodity to me. So I'll end it with Zeke. Yep,
that's a good one. Here we go. We had one down here that I think we had a super chat down here. Let me see if I can find it. I don't think we brought them all up yet. Just give me a second. Here we go. Here's one from Tyler Tyler Evans. I'm going to read this one, Ryan, since it's for you. This is an NFL draft question. So Tyler Evans, thank you for the super chat, by the way, Tyler. Says, Mr. Roberts, NFL draft question. What is the draft hype surrounding Will Levis? I don't see it. Let me add my little owner's note here too. Tyler, I agree. I don't get it.
Tyler, when I launch the NFL draft show soon, this might be one of the main topics to start. It might honestly be bad because, look, Will Levis is going to be a very controversial player in this class. It's maddening the level of hype that he's getting, to be honest, because, I mean, first and foremost, the question, right, is where's the hype coming from? Because I agree. Me and Brian have talked about this on the phone several times. I do not agree with the hype. I don't. Mm-mm. If you could tell me that I could get Will Levis in the day 2 range as a developmental quarterback, I'd be like, cool. We can get there on that. I can get there. There's talent there, obviously. But the reason that the hype is happening so far, I'm going to be honest about this, right? First and foremost is he does have a lot of talents, right? That's the main thing. 6'3", 230-something, strong arm, pretty flexible arm too, man. He can throw from different platforms, do all that type of stuff, and he's a good athlete. I mean, people forget when he was at Penn State, he was basically a wildcat quarterback working with Sean Clifford. Like, from a talent perspective, he has everything you look for from a physical perspective. I question a lot of consistent accuracy. I question a lot of decision-making, and he's like one of those quarterbacks, Brian, for me, that he makes some very difficult things look easy a lot, but then he makes some easy things look very difficult way too often. And that is a maddening thing, right? But the NFL teams are betting on upside, right? It's unrealistic to compare every Tracy quarterback to Josh Allen. It is unrealistic. Sure. He's an outlier. But
it's like comparing every freshman quarterback to Trevor Lawrence.
Yep.
And if you don't do what Trevor Lawrence did, because Ryan, Sean, and Davis and I were talking about this on the phone yesterday. Josh Allen is a guy that we were talking about. It was in reference to the question we had in yesterday's mailbag about, the NFC. And I'm like, look, I'm not mad at the NFC teams for passing on Josh Allen. I get that because the production wasn't there in college. He turned the ball over a bunch, and he was a low complete, and he didn't show the Deshaun Watson skills. Like those NFC teams that passed on Pat Mahomes, I would have told you going into the draft, Ryan. I don't know. You didn't know me then. People that did know, my buddy Tony will tell us. I was like, this kid is going to be a star. I just loved Pat Mahomes. And obviously thought very highly of Deshaun Watson.
I was high on Pat Mahomes as well.
Oh my gosh, I loved him coming out of college, and he got masked and hidden because he was at Texas Tech. I mean, if he would have played at Oklahoma or Texas, he's the number 1 overall pick in my opinion. Like I loved him coming out, but that was bad evaluation. I'm not mad at teams for passing on. The Bills took a chance on Josh Allen, and it paid out. It paid off. It's like I said to Sean, I was like, look. With all due respect to Andy Reid, who's a great coach and a great developer, if Andy Reid thought Pat Mahomes is going to be what he is now, he would not have waited till pick 10 to trade up to get him. It's like I've said this about Bill Belichick, genius for drafting Tom Brady in the 6th round. No, he's not. Like if he thought lucky. Tom Brady was if he thought Tom Brady was going to be anything like he was, he's a moron for waiting until the 6th round to draft him. Because the thing about me, chances you had for someone else to take him, and got lucky. I don't think the Bills got lucky like Tom Brady, but they took a chance because they needed to take a chance. It was a franchise that was just struggling, and they needed a face. And they saw this big-armed country boy with tons of athleticism, and they said, "Hey, why not?" You know what I mean? Right. Like they had struck out at quarterback. I mean, EJ Manuel. I mean, they've been making bad quarterback decisions, going all the way back to picking Rob Johnson over Doug Flutie.
Don't forget about JP Lossman, man.
But like they've been making, from Tulane, another great Tulane quarterback, right? Big arm Tulane quarterback. I mean, they needed to take that chance, and it paid off. But he's the anomaly, to Ryan's point. He's not the rule. That's why I say you don't let the exception define the rule. 100%. Because I could point to a whole lot more guys like Josh Allen who sucked in the NFL than guys who panned out like him.
Well, Brian, it's even this isn't a perfect comparison because they're not very similar football players. But the reason that the NFL freaked out about Zach Wilson was because Joe Burrow was a 1-year wonder, assumed, right? And it was like, wow, look at that breakout. We need to find that guy. right?
Yeah.
But the problem is that guy doesn't come out every year. It just doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
Josh Allen is not the rule. He landed in the perfect situation with a coaching staff that developed him really well, and he's extremely talented. They're getting the best out of his ability, obviously, right? And is it possible that Will Levis could be that guy? It's possible. Like if he lands in the right situation, sure. But to value him over Bryce Young or CJ Stroud right now, I think is ludicrous. I think it's insanity. I do. Because I think they're both very talented quarterbacks. The difference between of why they're being overlooked comparative to Will Levis in some circles is that Bryce Young is small. Sure. It's a talking point. It's a talking point. CJ Stroud is not consistently great out of pressure. Sure. We can talk about that. Those are things to talk about. And then
let me ask you this question, Ryan. Let me ask you this question before you go on. Do you think 20 years ago that Bryce Young and CJ Stroud are top 10 draft picks?
Bryce Young, no, absolutely not. Bryce Young, absolutely not. CJ maybe, because he's still 6'3", 220.
That's the thing right there. I think that's the reason why some people are willing to take a chance on Will Levis, because those other two kids are more system guys or have certain physical flaws. That are going to make them say, hey, if I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail on the big-armed, the big, strong, strapping, big-armed kid from, like Will Levis.
The NFL makes this mistake every year almost, man.
Dude got beat out by Sean Clifford.
Yes.
Joe Burrow got beat out by Dwayne Haskins. Will Levis got beat up by Sean freaking Clifford.
Yes. Yep. And I mean, it's where we are, man. And people are going to look at the tools. And again, it could hit, but most of those guys, are not Josh Allen, right? Jake Locker was not Josh Allen. The Blaine Gabberts of the world were not Josh Allen. Like those guys just did not materialize. Are they not talented? No, they're very talented. I mean, you remember Jake Locker at Washington, right, Brian? Like he was a stupidly talented football player. Strong arm, athletic, tough, all those things that you quantify with an NFL quarterback. But there's a big issue with Jake Locker. There's a big issue with Blaine Gabbert. They're more good quarterbacks. Let's come down to it. And usually when you don't draft good quarterbacks, they don't turn out to be good quarterbacks. What a revelation. What a revelation this is.
Jake Locker, I was okay taking a flyer on because he showed flashes of being that.
Yes.
Right.
And in the right situation, he may have been a good player. Maybe. May have happened.
Will Levis, though, I just don't see it. I just don't see it. I really don't see it. And the other thing about Jake Locker is, where was Jake Locker picked, Ryan?
He was he ended up 8th, I think, 8th overall, something like that.
So, I mean, that was high.
Yeah,
right? That was
high. Yeah.
Imagine if he went 1 or 2. Like, that's the thing for me. It's just like, I just don't get it. And here's the other thing, too, is he was the number 2 quarterback taken in that class. The best quarterback is already off the board. We're talking about them taking Will Levis number 1. Yeah. So that'd be like the Carolina Panthers passing on Cam Newton and taking Jake Locker or Blaine Gabbert. Yeah. That's the equivalent as I see it here. Now, I don't know if those guys are going to be as good as Cam Newton was for a short period of time, but like it just, I don't get it. I really don't get it. I would rather just take a different guy now. Maybe I suck again next year, but then I'm in position to get a Caleb Williams, a Drake May, or somebody like that.
Don't disagree. This is the NFL, though, man. This is the same issue we have seen countlessly.
Justin Fields is another example. I mean, the reaches that draft class had is just incredible. The number of because that was the 21 draft class, right? Correct. Trevor Lawrence was a no-brainer at 1. Although you had some people trying to argue that he wasn't the best quarterback in that draft class. But after that, it was like Zach Wilson. I mean, are you shocked at all that Zach Wilson is what he is right now? I'm not. No. I mean, first, he was always known to be a very immature kid. And his one good year happened to be that year where they played an awful schedule, right?
Yes.
He was always a goofball type of kid. And he was a guy that didn't show me great accuracy. He showed me a big, strong arm. Yeah, he could throw the ball 70 yards. Okay, who cares? How many times do you do that in an NFL game? Number one. And then you Trey Lance, very talented kid, but he hardly played really any football. And even North Dakota State did not build the offense around him. Like what he did at North Dakota State wasn't anywhere close to what Carson Wentz did at North Dakota State.
I think the problem with Trey Lance too is because I actually like Trey Lance's talent a lot coming out.
I love the talent, but Where he was picked is my issue.
Sure.
Because you were taking a huge risk that he would, because I'm sorry, Ryan, I cut you off. Continue.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think it's a little bit of a similar situation. Obviously, I'm not comparing them as players, but it's like the Tyler Buckner thing a little bit, right? He lacked experience coming out. Trey Lance did. A 1-year starter. His year got canceled to COVID. They played one football game that year. And he was a player that needed to play, right? He needs experience. And then he gets hurt this year, right? It's just like, I mean, if Trey Lance never gets hurt, maybe he develops and he's, he's the 49ers starting quarterback right now. It's possible, but he's just lost so much time due to injury. And
that was the thing I had. That was the issue that I had too, Ryan, is he only had 1 year as a starter. And in that 1 year, despite playing a full season of, 12 regular season games, 4 playoff games, he passed for like 2,700 yards. That's it. I mean, he had 3 games in that year where he threw 10 or fewer passes, including the national championship game where he went 6 of 10 for 72 yards. He had a game where he went 7 of 9 for 160 yards, 7 of 14 for 62 yards, 10 for 11, 11 for 15, 12 for 15. That year, right, for the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the first 9 games that 1 year he was a starter, he had less than 200 yards passing in a game at the 1AA level. And so you look at that stuff and you're like, how does a guy like that get picked where he got picked? A kid who played 1 year as a starting quarterback, right? Because in 2018, he was a backup. He threw 1 pass the year before. In 2020, he had the 1 game. He had played 1 game, went 15 of 30 for 149 yards. So this guy had 1 full season as a starting quarterback and threw for over 300 yards just once. And he only threw for over 200 yards 4 times an entire season, and you're taking him in the top 5 of the NFL draft. How do you take an FCS kid who has 1 career start of over 300 yards, and he had more games where he threw under 100 yards than he threw over 300 yards?
Yeah.
That's the whole problem. You can't take a guy like that at 5. But that's what the NFL's turned into. And see, here's where that hurts a guy like Trey Lance. If Trey Lance would have been drafted where he should have been drafted, end of the first round, then nobody's like losing their minds about why he's not playing. And they wouldn't have maybe felt the need to force him into the lineup this year, right? You could have let him come along more slowly. That's the other problem, is they're investing so much money in these quarterbacks. You can't do what the Oilers did with Steve McNair. You can't bring him in and let him sit for a couple years and let him cook in the oven a little bit. You know what I mean? Like you have to play him now, because Steve McNair would have failed miserably his first couple years if he was thrust into the starting lineup with the Oilers. But they didn't make him do that, because they knew this guy is making a big jump from Alcorn State to the NFL. Yeah. And so his first 2 years, Steve McNair started 6 games. That's it. He threw 223 passes his first 2 years. And then they kind of brought him along slowly. And then eventually he became a heck of a player. But nowadays, like Steve, his first year, 5, 6, 7, 8, the first year that he became a guy that his first Pro Bowl year wasn't until year 6. First year he finished in the top 10 of MVP voting wasn't until year 8. And his MVP season wasn't until year 9. There's no way he lasts that long in Houston now. And that's the problem. That's the reason NFL development sucks, because they don't develop these young guys. They don't give them time to marinate. They don't give them time to develop. Aaron Rodgers didn't start for a couple years, right? I mean, he may not have liked that, but I think that helped him. It helped him benefit him. Just there's the NFL just doesn't know how to draft or handle quarterbacks in most parts, and that's the problem.
I think one other mistake that people make with quarterback evaluation is they fall for the flash too much. I think that's why like Zach Wilson is a thing, right? It's like, wow, look at that throw off platform that he makes. But it's like the out of structure stuff doesn't matter if the structure doesn't, the structure isn't good.
1,000%
like
right.
That's what it is, right? It's like
right.
Because that's Will Levis right now, right? It's like, wow, he can make some of these throws, but it's just like, but he misses layups constantly.
Same with Justin Fields. Same with Justin Fields. Like physically, just if you're talking about who's got the better physical tools, Justin Fields is a better quarterback prospect than Joe Burrow.
Oh, easy.
Better arm, more athletic, bigger, stronger body. Joe Burrow is 15 times the quarterback that Justin Fields is and always has been. I mean, so think about how many raw, high upside kids they took in that draft, in that top 10. And it's just like, this is why NFL is what it is, because these teams don't know how to look at a quarterback and say, that guy may not have this, but that guy knows how to run an offense. Right. That guy knows how to get the ball. Back in the 80s and 90s, around, I understood that, because the NFL was still very much a down the field vertical passing game that if you didn't have the arm for it, you couldn't win.
Right.
It's just the way that it was. It's not that game anymore. Yeah, you still need arm strength. I mean, the best quarterbacks in the league right now have strong arms, but it's why to me is Joe Burrow beating Josh Allen? One, better supporting cast, and two, it's more consistent.
Yeah.
Josh Allen's going to make some insane plays. He's also going to miss some layups. But he as he's gotten older, he misses fewer and fewer and fewer of those. But the natural feel for the game was always so much better than Zach Allen's. He just was raw. But you could see with Josh Allen at Wyoming, you could see he's going through reads. He's doing this. He's doing that. He may have made the wrong read, but he's going through reads where when you watch Zach Allen, you're like, this kid's not reading a defense. He's going 1-2 throw. I mean, and guys are wide open. So it just – I never understood it, man. I mean, I understand it, but I don't understand. Does that make sense? Like, okay, I see the talent you're obsessed with, but how many times does this not have to work before you realize this isn't the way to go? I mean, this has been going on for decades. And I mean, like the name I like to point to is, I mean, Will Levis is the modern day Jim Druckenmiller, for people my age, I mean, think about E.J. Manuel. Christian Ponder was a first-round NFL draft pick. What in
Russell,
the world?
Number 1 overall. Yeah.
Right? At least like with Jamarcus, you could kind of understand it. He did have some success at LSU, and
you know what's funny though, Brian. I know a former NFL scout that was in the room when they drafted Jamarcus Russell, like he was a part of that process, and everyone was so against that pick, man. Was so against it. Al Davis wanted his guy, man. He wanted his guy. He wanted the flashy quarterback from LSU. All right, they wanted to trade back and take Adrian Peterson. That was what they wanted to do.
Yeah, that'd have been a nice move.
Yes. Or Joe Thomas was in that draft too. So apparently the top two on the scouts board was Adrian Peterson and Joe Thomas.
Yeah.
And
Let me ask you this question, Ryan. If you're the Bears and somebody wants to come up and take Will Levis, would you take that trade?
Oh, absolutely. What do you think?
I wouldn't go out of the top 5.
Yeah, because you still want to get one of the blue chips. You still want to get Jalen Carter, Will Anderson. Like, you still want to get one of those. Yeah.
Here's the other question, NFL draft. Would you trade Justin Fields and take Bryce Young, or would you trade Justin Fields and take Bryce Young or CJ Stroud?
If I was the Bears? If I was the Bears. I wouldn't, and it's not because – so this is the conversation I had the other day. Bryce Young is a higher rated player than what Justin Fields was coming out for me, right? So I have a higher opinion on Bryce Young. But with where the Bears are right now, I think that they need to fill just holes right now, man. I don't think the quarterback instantly fixes anything. I just don't. And Justin Fields showed me enough this year that I could say at least he's improving, right? At least he showed some improvements. So I would stick with him and I would mortgage that first overall pick for as many picks as possible because that roster's bad right now, man.
Yeah.
They have a bad offensive line, bad defense. They need more playmakers. They just gave up what would have been the 32nd overall pick this year because of the vacated pick for Chase Claypool. What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
Yeah.
You need draft picks right now. You need to allocate picks to build this roster because the roster stinks right now. It's a bad roster.
You sound like the dude at the beginning of draft day. I'm not selling the farm for one pick. You should because your farm stinks.
It stinks.
I don't disagree.
Here's
the dream scenario for the Bears. This would be my dream scenario if I'm the Bears. Okay, and you Bears fans, tell me how wrong I am. I would look at 4 and 7 with the Colts and the Raiders for a trade up if one of those teams wants a quarterback.
Apparently the Colts are infatuated with Will Levis, by the way.
Great. You're going to get you're going to get the 4 at 4. If you're the Bears, let me finish it. Yep. You're at 4, you're going to still get a premium player. Okay. Here's what I would do. because I agree with you. I think they have two great resources right now that can fetch them a lot of capital, a lot of draft capital. And one is the number one pick. The other one is Justin Fields. And so because Justin Fields showed promise, I think you could actually get something from him. Whether it's a first down the road or a couple seconds and whatever the case may be, if you can trade from 1 to 4, pick up somebody's number one pick next year, plus your own, plus whatever draft capital you're going to get from Justin Fields, you're talking about getting 5 premium draft spots, and you're only going down to 4, and you're getting Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. To me, that would be something that I would say, hey, I feel good about it. And then if, say, worst case scenario, somebody takes the 2 quarterbacks you like before you're picking up 4, you got 2 first-round picks next year that you can use to trade up to take Caleb Williams or Drake May. Because to your point, you're not one off season away from fixing this thing, is my point. So I would trade down to 4 with the Colts if I'm the Bears, and then I would look to trade. I would be very open to give me some premium draft picks for Justin Fields. Because as you said, now all of a sudden, Ryan, you just got 5 premium draft picks, including at least 1 extra first round pick, to now all of a sudden, get the quarterback you want plus a lot of other premium draft. I know it'd be hard to pass on Will Anderson and Jalen Carter, but the reality is, Ryan, you can't win a Super Bowl in the NFL if you don't have a quarterback. And I just don't think I think Justin Fields is a good quarterback, or could potentially maybe be a good quarterback. I don't think he's a championship caliber NFL quarterback. I just don't.
It's possible.
I just don't. He's not even the pass Lamar Jackson was coming out. And I have doubts about Lamar Jackson being good enough to do that. Because when you start getting into game 19 and 20 and 21, and your legs have been taking a beating all year, you better be able to make some throws, man. You better be able to make some throws. And that's my thoughts. What do you think about that, Rye?
You said that I'm the draft day guy, and you just came out with this scenario of the next step after the next step to get. I love it though, man. I love it.
But like you said, they need players. You have 2 huge pieces that can get you a lot of draft capital right now, and that's my thing.
I like the train of thought. I really do. I question how much you could get back for Justin Fields right now.
You don't think you get like a couple seconds?
Maybe.
I mean, somebody's about to draft freaking Will Levis in the top 5.
I hear you. I feel you, man. I feel you. But also, the NFL didn't love Justin Fields coming out. He was the 4th quarterback taken.
What was he? Didn't he go 7th or 10th? Something.
He went 11th, I think. 11th or 12th. Yeah, they didn't love him. They didn't love him coming out, which is
understandable.
Yeah,
I just don't know how you didn't love him, but you love Will Levis.
Justin Fields is
a far more productive quarterback and a better college quarterback.
I mean, even in that draft, how do you prefer Zach Wilson over Justin Fields even, right? It's just like exactly. But we'll see.
Yeah, it's silly. I don't think Justin Fields is as good as some people think he is, but I think he's a lot better than some other people think he is, in my opinion.
Yes.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Well, it's a good thing that this channel may have a draft show soon. It's a good thing.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe even starting next week or something, Ryan. Who knows?
Man.
Who knows?
Yeah,
Here's one from Omar Austin with a super chat. Omar, thank you very, very much.
Thank you for the content, guys. You're welcome. And special thanks to Angela and team for keeping the board fast. I live in country. Website team, y'all have been clutch.
Thank you, Omar, very, very much. Yeah, we had a thing where it's starting to slow up a couple days ago because there was some kind of caching issue. They caught it and have fixed it. So it slowed up for a few days, but they got it back up and rolling. So
shout out Ange.
Yep, very, very happy. I kind of like her, Ryan. That's just me. That's just me. So we got some more up here. Let's get back up to here. John A1. We'll get back to some of yours. We're having to skip some of yours, John, because you have like all the ones at the top. So we're trying to mix up and mix some other people in here.
Man, John was feeling it before the show started, man.
The problem is they're all great questions.
They are great questions.
You know what I mean?
John always
so
has
it's like,
good ones, man.
Yeah.
He always has good ones. His question here, though, is, are there design quarterback runs that Sam Hartman could be effective at Notre Dame?
Yeah, like stuff that's going to get him in space, to move the chains. Yeah, I'm cool with that. A read zone where you're predicting that they're going to crash the backside and he pulls it and gets it out. Yeah, I can see that. The occasional quarterback draw, Ryan, we've seen him do at Wake Forest, like where you really think they're going to vacate and run for 7, 8, 10 yards, where you're doing it to catch a team off guard and to keep them honest and to move the chains. You're not doing it to like, boy, we really think we can hurt a team this week with a bunch of design quarterback runs. It's just something you kind of have in your back pocket to say, hey, look, if we get in a situation we really need a first down and it's 3rd and 3, I think I can steal 20 yards because, man, they just crash the backside against 13 personnel or 12 personnel, and you line up like this, man, they just crash that backside hard, and we think Sam can pull it and get outside on a counter, Q keep or a quarterback counter and just get out the back door where he's got 2 lead blockers against 1 corner. And then, but it's more catching a defense than it is you think Sam can go out and rip off a big play is my 2 cents.
You're not running quarterback power with Sam Hartman, right? You're sneaking one backside. Right. I think that's a perfect way to put it, man. Like he's and I hate this term, so I hate using it right now, but Sam Hartman's a sneaky athlete, like he's not a great athlete, but he's a sufficient player that can take what is given to him at times, right? So zone read out the back door occasionally when that end just keeps crashing because you are just tearing him up inside with Estime and Diggs, and then all of a sudden he's out the back door for 10 to 15 yards. Like that's the ideal scenario for a guy like a Sam Hartman because he can do some of that stuff. He just isn't a design quarterback read guy like typically. It's more zone stuff, and he's out the back door. I think that's a great way to put it. He's out the back door. That's what he is.
Yep, I agree. Good question, John. Let's get down here to one from David Lowe. He has a recruiting question here, Ryan. He says, I'm going to ask you this one first. I'm going to read this one because I want you to speak on it first. Do y'all guys think that recruiting player rankings are biased or fair? I see a lot of people upset with how far our recruits dropped. I'll give you first crack at this one.
I mean, yeah, David, they're biased. Yeah, they are. I mean, if you're a player that is picking Alabama comparative to if you're a Notre Dame, I do think that there is a bias that goes into kind of putting that guy up, a couple pegs. I also think that it's a imperfect process by a lot of people because you'll see guys you'll see guys steadily rise or stay the same throughout the entire process if they select the school late, right? But if it's a Brendan Vernon that picks a school super early and doesn't, there's no wavering or anything like that, he's going to stay stagnant on top of picking Notre Dame. So I think there's bias, absolutely, 100%. I also think there's bias sometimes, not only from the schools that players pick, but what school they come from, what region they come from. Because sometimes, right, if a player comes from, and I mean, they deserve this to a degree because they're a great program, obviously, right? But like St. John Bosco is a school, right, that everyone knows. It's a fantastic school in the state of California. Sometimes I feel like there are some players, I think of like a Real Mitchell that came out of there, the quarterback a few years ago, right?
Uyunglele is another example.
Where good player, no doubt, but are they as good as what the rankings say? Probably not, because they played on a star-studded team that puts out a lot of talent. So I think those programs get the benefit of the doubt comparative to an Amesworth High School in the state of Nebraska for the Carter Nelson because he just doesn't play anyone or he's in the middle of nowhere and he doesn't come from a powerhouse school. So I do think there's bias on both sides of it.
There's so many things that I find as biases, Ryan, and some of it used to look. Every evaluator has biases. Everyone does. The key, I'm talking NFL GMs, NFL scouts, NFL director of recruiting, NFL coaches at the very highest level, you all have biases. What is a bias? I admitted one of mine earlier, Ryan. I like big receivers. And so I have to make sure that when I'm grading receivers that I have number one, I've had to make my grading system such that I have made it to where the categories that I picked allow for a smaller, faster guy to equal out the size thing. So then it becomes more about the other skills, right? Or I'll have to reach out to people that I know and respect who have a different type of receiver bias and pick their brain about a kid. That's just the reality of it, right? And so you've got to recognize your bias. Those aren't the biases that I'm referring to, and I think that Ryan's referring to. Our biases are this kid's from Florida, so he must be this, or this kid's from Bosco, he must be this, or
it's the scouting the helmet thing.
This kid's going to Bama, like the receiver that I can't remember his name, like Cole Adams or something like that.
Oh yeah.
If that kid's committed to Kentucky instead of Alabama, nobody has him ranked in the top 200. Nobody. And there's a lot of kids like that. And I've pointed this out in the past. Now, the thing for me is if you're a Notre Dame fan and you think that rankings are biased, then you need to give me examples outside of just what's going on with Notre Dame players. That's the reality of it. Because I don't think any service has a bias where the only team that they screw over is Notre Dame. Do I think there are outlets that do that? Yes, I do. Do I think Notre Dame's the only one they do that for? No, I don't. And that's just the reality of it. But here's an example of they're different. I actually don't think On3 has a bias against a team. I think On3 is just not good at evaluating and ranking players.
Yes.
Because they have like one guy doing it. And so now you're beholden to all of his biases. He has this obsession with offensive linemen. So there's like offensive linemen ranked in the top 100. You're like, dude, that guy has no business being ranked where you have him ranked. And there's other things where like there's just no way one guy can watch enough to come up with a top 300. You know, like I have a hard time coming up with the top 100, and I've been doing this for a long time. And I'll have my top 100 coming out here pretty soon. But the problem is there's too many other biases now that are not related to the talent. And I can live. I'm hey, you miss on the big strapping, strong-armed Southern quarterback every year, but that's an identifiable bias that I don't think is any malice intended. The issue that I have now with the biases that exist now with a lot of these networks is there's malice intended. You have people that run some of these recruiting outlets who used to cover teams that the fan base didn't treat them right. And so you see that network all of a sudden starts not treating Notre Dame players correctly. Just as a hypothetical example, they take into account more of what's going to sell. Bama fans and Georgia fans are rabid. So did Alabama have the best class in the country this year? Take rankings out of the equation. Did Alabama have the best recruiting class in the country this year? Yes, they did. Take rankings out. I don't care what the rankings say. They did. But it's not as good. It's not so much better than everybody else that they make it out to be. Because, for example, I saw an outlet that has Eli Holstein as a 5-star quarterback. He wouldn't even be my top 200 because he's just not that good. He's just not. But he's going to Bama, so he's ranked high. So you see things like that, Ryan, with Georgia and Bama and some of these other teams where these guys get bumped up high because they're going to that school. That doesn't mean that school didn't have the number one class. And it doesn't mean that if the rankings weren't biased, Alabama would have the number 7 recruit. I'm not saying that. But instead of them being here and everybody else being here, they're here and everybody else is here. That's the difference, which is why Bama doesn't win a championship. Here's the thing. I have people tell me 2 things. Nick Saban's the greatest coach ever, and Alabama beats everyone on the recruiting trail every year. Then he's not the greatest coach ever. If they dominate on the recruiting trail every single year, then he should have more championships than he has. So you're telling me more often than not in the last 5 years, Nick Saban has been out-coached. And that's why he's not winning championships. Because I keep to everything. He's got the best roster. Well, but Georgia can match him now. Georgia didn't beat him this year. Tennessee did.
Right.
Maybe some of the talent's not as good as people thought it was. Right? Now, he's also had some other issues with coordinators and things like that. But, they went through a stretch. They won the championship in 12. And then they didn't win another championship until 15. Did Nick Saban not know how to coach in those years? Or maybe some of those recruiting classes were a little bit inflated to where maybe they had the best class, but this other team was not as far off as people thought that they were. Right? And so that's kind of my point. Like if Isaiah Simmons was from Atlanta, there's no way anyone ranks him as a 3-star player. No way.
Kansas. Yeah.
If Harrison Smith was from Atlanta or Dallas or Miami instead of from Knoxville Catholic, nobody has him outside of the top 50. He was an elite prospect. I don't care what anybody says. I remember thinking that coming out of high school. So there's always those types of biases. But for me, the reason I can confidently say that some of these rankings are just trash is not because of what happens with Notre Dame players. Because there's one outlet in particular that I think has some couple Notre Dame players too high. Like here, Sullivan Absher's ranking it On3 is a perfect example. They dropped him 200 spots because of the All-Star game. Now, my whole response, Ryan, is that's stupid. It's stupid to drop him 200 spots in an All-Star game and then not drop Luke Montgomery, who is even worse. But here's the thing. His ranking is now kind of closer to what I think it should be. They had originally had him 58th. So why? He shouldn't have been 58th, but it was a bias towards a certain type of offensive lineman that evaluator has, right? And now it's kind of come a little bit closer to what it should be. Did he now all of a sudden develop this anti-Notre Dame bias that caused him to drop some? No, he's using faulty criteria. to come to his rankings conclusion, right? So that's not an anti-Notre Dame bias. That's a bias I can actually live with. Now, I think On3's rankings suck, but I'll be honest with you. I have more respect for their process than I do for the other services, if that makes sense. Because I think they're just wrong. I don't think there's malice intended. Does that kind of make sense, Ryan? And I can deal with you being wrong because, number one, you can get better. You can change your process and maybe get a few more people involved that are legitimate evaluators. But when there's malice intended, and malice to me can be to hurt a Notre Dame or to hurt another team that's not a big name, or malice could also be we think this guy should be hired because he's a big social media guy. He's a real favorable guy, more clicks, more whatever. We want to get in with his high school. We want to get in with his parents. We want to get in with whatever the case, the coaching staff at that team. Then those things to me are that's malice, right? That's to me, that's malice. And I think there's too much of that in the rankings today. And so it's why I have even less respect for the rankings now than I did 5-10 years ago. And it's been a long time since I respected rankings. And I used to respect them a lot because I knew a lot of the guys when I first got into this. I knew a lot of the guys that were involved in the rankings. And even some of them who I didn't like Barton Simmons very much, but I really felt like Bart, like personally, was always kind of a jerk. In instances I've been around him, but whatever, it is what it is. But I always felt like he took a lot of pride in, let's get this right. And so there were times that I was like, dude, I think you're way overhyping that kid, but they had a reason why they overhyped him. And one guy that I thought they way overhyped was George Karlaftis. Well, comes to find out, they were closer to being right on him than I was. I didn't have him in my top 100. They had him at number 8. They were closer to being correct, in my opinion, than I was, because I evaluate rankings based on what you were in college. And he was a darn good college defensive end, better than I thought he would be. There's been other times they had guys where, I thought they were wrong and I was right. They were wrong. But I always felt like early on in 24/7, there was at least a desire to get it right. I don't think that exists anymore. Yeah. Rivals Rivals used to have a bunch of former college scouts and college coaches doing rankings early on. And then they went away from that and they started having people like Mike Farrell do it. And that's when they lost their way. And so that's why I have zero use. Like ESPN, for example, ESPN tries to evaluate correctly, but then they try to mix in, Southern kid, there's way too many Florida kids. The best players in Florida, I get that, but not to that degree. Because the NFL draft and the NFL shows that it's not to that degree, right? And so, yes, Florida has the best talent, but not 40 kids in the top 100 or whatever the case may be. It was one of those years. You know what I mean? So it's just like, to Ryan, that's kind of where I kind of come from on this is too much of this is just, who cares about your all-star game? Well, our all-star game makes us money, so we have to care. Oh, okay, I get that, but see, that's why I just can't respect, what you're doing. Like, does Florida have the best talent in America? Yes, they do. Do they have 61 of the 300 best players in the country like ESPN has them? No, they don't. 61 of the top 300 players in the ESPN 300 are from Florida. That's no. It's just no. It's not to that degree the best, and that's kind of my point, Ryan. Is I think that's where they miss me. That's where they kind of miss me a little bit. And then you look at Texas, and Texas has 48, so 109 of the 300 best players in the country are from 2 states. Would you say that Florida and Texas produce the best talent in the country, Ryan? I think we'd both agree with that, right? But not to that degree. And so that's a bias. That's a bias I can live with because I just know they have a Florida bias, right? I don't think there's malice. Dropping Tommy Kramer 100 spots after he commits to the Army game in not your game, that's malice. And that's why I have a hard time respecting ESPN, is because of that. And so that's why I have rankings issues, because it didn't used to be that way. Not as much. And honestly, that's why I just think a lot of these rankings are utterly useless, to be honest with you. And the problem is people are more and more and more dependent upon them, and they make arguments for that more and more and more and more as look how, and they always spin what accuracy means, right? in order to hype up why they do what they do. And it just, to me, it just, it cheapens the business a little bit more. And it's only going to get worse with NIL. It's only going to get worse in my opinion.
Way worse.
So
when you have a site that is putting an NIL valuation on a player, like it's going to get way worse. It's going to get way worse.
And I'm still trying to find out like how some of their rankings, like on 3, I still don't understand how their class rankings are tabulated. I still don't get that one. Like that one makes no sense to me because it's strange. Like, and that's the other thing too about class rankings. How, like, what's the cutoff, right? They have these arbitrary numbers that they put on it, right? So I've pointed this out before. Notre Dame signed more 3, 4, and 5-star players in Oklahoma, has a higher per player average than Oklahoma. They signed more 4 and 5-star players than LSU and more 4 and 5-star players than Miami. LSU barely had a higher yard player average. It was 91.64 compared to 91.47 for Notre Dame. And Florida was 91.18. Notre Dame was 91.47. Notre Dame had more 4 and 5-star players. Miami signed one more player than Notre Dame. Oklahoma? How's Oklahoma ranked ahead of Notre Dame? Miami's at 90.85 average player ranking. Notre Dame's at 91.47 on the on-3 standard. So how do they have a higher ranking than Notre Dame? Because of the way this, I don't know. The average ranking isn't high.
Is it an algorithm? Like I actually don't understand how they do it.
That's the whole thing. They don't explain it as far as I know. At least Rivals explains, here's the point system. Here's how points are handed out. We take the top 20 players in the class, and if you're ranked here, this is the point system you get. I can say it's stupid, and how come a guy that's ranked 32nd all of a sudden gets a higher ranked thing than the other guy? The other one, too, is Shannon Terry says we're always going to have, I heard him say this in an interview, we're always going to have 32 players ranked as 5 stars. His explanation is, which I thought was really silly, was, well, there's 32 first-round NFL draft picks.
Oh, my God.
Like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Like,
because every single year there's 32 players that have first-round grades, right?
No. What did I read the other day? Some outlet said there's 20, right? And so it's just one of those things where it's like, that's such Scout used to do 50. If you're a top 50 player, you're 5-star. That actually makes more sense to me than 32. Because they should say, hey, if you're a top 50 player in the country, you're really flipping good. Now, to me, I think that's too many. My whole thing is, what is wrong? Here's another thing. Rivals, I guarantee you, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm pretty confident this is the case. The reason that Adon Schuler got dropped to a 3-star is because Rivals has a set arbitrary number. They can only have X number of 4-star players. And so when they get past that, if you're gonna add a guy as a 4-star, you got to drop somebody down. And so that's what they'll do. I know that for a fact. Now, did they do that with Adon Schuler? I don't know that for a fact, but I know that that's how their system works. Why? That's arbitrary. There may be years around there's only 12 5-star players because you're either a 5-star or you're not, and you're a 5-star based on your grade, not your ranking slot. There may be years around there's 45 5-star guys. Who knows? But you're either a 5-star or you're not. You're either 4-star or you're not. You either reach that grade or you don't. It's not, well, here's the cutoff. So you're not a 4-star because we've reached our quota. But if you graded me on a scale, I'd still be a 4-star. Right? So why am I supposed to take that seriously and use that as the reason to evaluate whether a class is or is not good?
I'd rather them just not rate the guys that under that threshold, because I just think it just gives such a false notion of how good a player is, man. Like, I just really do. It's just annoying. Yeah. It's very annoying to me.
Yeah, no doubt. So good question, David. But man, I hope that explains to you why I just don't care about. Oh, well, they get this guy right. Did we really need Rivals to tell us that Trevor Lawrence was really good? Did I really need that? Some guys are obvious. That's not what defines you. It doesn't. You looking at Keon Keeley and being like, he's an elite player, it does not impress me.
Somehow people are still low on Keon Keeley's a couple of platforms, which don't make any sense.
First of all, he shouldn't be any lower than number 1, in my opinion. But if you're going to put positional value into the conversation, which is fair, and you want to hype up some quarterbacks, I wouldn't do that. But if that's fair, then sure, you can have him in the top 5. But if you don't have Keon Keeley in your top 5, you just are not good at evaluating football players. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, Ryan, did you see anything that changed your mind about him being a top 5 player when you were down at – so, I mean, what elite tools, high school film, and then the All-Star game. Every single metric that you try to use – he's going to Bama. Every single metric that you say is important to you to evaluate, he checks all of them as an elite top 5 player. And yet there's still people that don't have him in the top 10.
It's wild. It's wild. Man.
So, I don't get that one. He's the best player. He's the best player in the country this year, and I don't think it's that close, honestly. I don't. I think he's clearly heads and shoulders above everyone else in this class, in my opinion.
Kid's so good, man. He's so good.
Yep.
In person, it's like he just like solidifies everything you think about him too. It's just like,
and like he was like coming up and talking to you at the thing. I mean, just a really nice, polite. He's a good kid. I mean,
he's a great kid, great kid.
He just made a decision that I didn't like, but he's a great player. So yeah, some of this stuff, like it just, I hope that at least helps give you a little explanation, David, on why we just don't take this stuff seriously at this point in time. And I'll tell you this, Ryan, I don't know if it's going to be this year. I don't know if it's going to be next year, but after watching 247's rankings and then watching Rivals arbitrary rankings, and CFB Nation is going to create its own ranking service. We will do that. And at first it probably just be me and Ryan, but we're eventually going to build that thing out because this to me, there's just a yearning for just honest analysis. And we'll be wrong. We're going to get kids wrong, but you're going to know that there's no bias in it. There's not going to be Notre Dame bias. There's just going to be, this is what we think. And I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. And watching the rankings this year, Ryan, they were so bad. And the drops were just so arbitrary and just like inexcusable that I'm just like, and it's not just for Notre Dame players. I mean, there's people that have Jason Moore like out of the top 100. What?
Yeah.
What? Like he's not going to Notre Dame. That's absurd. Like Eli Holstein is a 5-star player. One service says Jackson Arnold is the number 3 player in the country.
Yes.
What crack are you? I mean, I don't know what new synthetic drug you're on right now, but it must be really messing with your brain to have him as the number 3 player in the country. I don't even have him as a top 5 quarterback. I don't even have him as a top 10 quarterback, me personally. But I mean, it's just, I mean, ridiculous. Like, would you trade right now if you could trade Jackson Arnold for Kenny Minchie? Would you do it? I know that's kind of a hard question to ask because it's not possible, but my answer's always been no.
If both are healthy, not even close. Not even close.
Yeah. All right, let's get to some more here. We got one from Logan Thayer. Here's a good one, Ryan.
Does any team have 3 defensive defenders big enough to guard Mitchell Evans at 6'5", Deion Colsey at 6'5", and Tobias Merriweather at 6'4" in the red zone? Remind me just how good Sam Hartman is at back shoulder throws again.
Logan Thayer's getting a little fired up today.
He is, man. He is.
Is there anyone that can guard them with size? No, it's not. But there's ways to defend big receivers because big receivers have their own issues. They tend to not be as quick-footed as smaller guys. So do you have a corner that can kind of get in their chest? I mean, I think of what LSU did to Notre Dame's big receivers in 2006, right? It just jammed them. Just didn't let them get free releases, didn't let them get clean releases, and then used their pass rush to attack Brady Quinn. He didn't have time to get the ball out to him. Ohio State tried to do that, but Notre Dame, with Stovall and Samardzija in 2005, it was just a little harder for Ohio State to do that. And so Brady still threw for like over 280 yards that game, and Notre Dame moved the ball pretty good. They couldn't put it in the end zone and couldn't stop Ohio State. But they just beat him up. I mean, that's what USC did to him in 2006 too. They just beat Ream up. They couldn't, beat Samardzija up, and they wouldn't let him get off the line, and then they would just pressure Brady because they could get after the quarterback. But the key is, Ryan, I'd say, is if your offensive line is as good as we think it is, it's going to be hard for teams to keep all of those guys in check, in my opinion. Anywhere, much less the red zone.
I do think there's a misnomer as far as that you have to match size with size defensively to offensively, because to your point, Brian, the one thing about wide receivers is when they're coming off the line, right? Like 6'5" Deion Colsey, for instance, it's a big target area, right? If you're talking about a guy that's really good as a press corner, the ability to jam at the line of scrimmage. So I would actually argue that I don't need a 6'4" corner. I need a 6-foot corner that has good hand location as far as being able to jam and redirect and do all those type of things. But, I mean, Logan, to Brian's point, I agree wholeheartedly in it. Sam Hartman, I mean, excels at those outside the number throws, back shoulder throws. He does a great job with those. And you have 3 giants in there. And that's not even including Braylon James, who's 6'3 plus, right? Or right around 6'3. Who, Jaden Greathouse might not be 6'4, but he's 6'1 and some change and physical as anything outside the numbers, right? So you have a lot of guys that are going to be hard to handle one-on-one. I think that the biggest thing is pass protection, like Brian said, but you also need multiple guys to develop this year as far as being guys that defense need to keep attention to, right? Because if I have just Deion Colsey as the only guy I have to worry about, for instance, right, I can roll coverage that way. So I get 2 guys on him to try to defend him that way. If you are a balanced offense where you have to worry about Tobias and you have to worry about Deion, you have to worry about Mitchell and whoever else, Jaden Thomas, then if you are seeing that means that a lot more man-to-man coverage is coming because you just don't have enough bodies to throw at multiple guys that way. So if you have an opportunity to get one-on-one matchup with those guys, you have to like your odds if you're Notre Dame, if they develop properly.
Agree. Yeah. I also think too is size in the red zone only works if he's got certain skills. You can't just be big. He's got to be fluid. He's got to have great body control because you're going to have a lot shorter room to work with. I think size can be a weapon you should use in the red zone, but you can't just line up and throw fades all day. Like it can't be the only thing that you do. Size to me is more effective out on the field when I have more room I can launch a ball 40 yards where the safety can't get over. Right. And so I think, yes, if you have size in the red zone, you need to use it effectively, but that doesn't just mean using size. Like the thing that Notre Dame used to do with, remember Mo Stovall and Samardzija, is they didn't throw a lot of fades to them. They do these high-low back lines and just have Brady throw that sucker at about 11 feet and let them go up and get 10 feet and let them go up and get it. That's fine if you have guys that can get separation, because if they're not getting separation, then they're just going to get pushed out of bounds.
Absolutely.
Right. So there's all the stuff that comes before it, getting clean and being able to stem and lean and doing all that kind of stuff that allows you to do that. So,
and I think it's a good note about the size in the red zone too, Brian, because I remember Julio Jones was not a very good red zone receiver, but you know who was a good red zone receiver? Antonio Brown was fantastic in the red zone. He was only 5'10", buck 85, but he knows how to find that space, right? Like he knows where that is. Some tall receivers, they don't know how to find the space, right? Like they're just jump ball guys that are just trying to get in a position. And the problem is that that's easier to cover than a guy that knows how to find holes in defense, right? I mean, that's pretty substantial stuff. So I think that's a good note, though, is that it's not always just dependent on size.
Right. Let's see here from here's one from CVLang08.
The question is, how is the staff prioritizing defensive line recruiting? With so many offers out and news of reciprocated interest, it feels like we are going to have more guys wanting to come than spots allotted.
That can be a good problem to have if you're a staff that has good communication.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is you could end up being in a situation where if you're not honest with kids about where they stand, you get a bunch of kids wanting to commit that you don't want. And then they try to commit early. They don't want to come. You burn that bridge, and then you miss out on the other kids, and then now you don't have either. So there has to be a healthy level of communication. You also have to be willing to say, okay, who are we're taking now, guys? And because what you also can't do, Ryan, is load up too soon to where you've now run out of room, and you don't have room for multiple studs that want to maybe come later. Right. So it can be a tough challenge, but I actually like this angle of loading up and then trying to figure it out, as opposed to what they used to do, which is just they'd offer a small number of kids, and then if they didn't get the guys at the top of their board, then they would move on from like, okay, we didn't get this stud lineman, so let's go get Brandon Thiassum. It was like, okay, you skipped plan B and went right to plan C. You know what I mean? Like, plan B guys are, to me, if you're talking about real plan Bs, that they're good football players. They're not, oh shoot, we don't have anybody, we need somebody. That's not a plan B. That's a plan F, because you're F'd at that point.
It's a plan yikes. Yikes.
Yeah, exactly. So I just I I don't see it that way to me. But it's got to be good communication. You have a good strategy on who you will and won't take. And there's been communications in the problems in the past that would result in a coach taking a commitment from a kid that they weren't ready to take a commitment from. Sometimes that resulted in them having to keep a kid in the class. Other times it's resulted in them embarrassing a kid. So that's what happened with TJ Sheffield.
Yeah.
Is the receiver coach took his commitment, but nobody else on the staff did not get the okay to do that. That happened with that Jordan Porter kid. Remember him, the kid from California that committed to Notre Dame? He didn't decommit. The area recruiter, Brian Polian, basically kind of was not truthful with a lot of the coaches. He was telling I think it was Chip Long and I'm actually going to look up. I believe this is the kid's year, but it was a Jordan Porter kid from he ended up going to Arizona State, ended up somewhere else. Yes, 2018. So it was the class I'm thinking of. So he wanted that kid because Brian Polian is obsessed with getting my numbers, and he was one of his kids. So he told Chip Long, "Hey, I like this kid. I think we can get him to commit." And Chip was like, "That's fine, but I don't want him right now. I have other priorities: Kevin Austin, Lawrence Keys, Braden Lindsey. There was other guys that he wanted in that class." So he said, "I'm not ready to take him right now." And then he went to Mike Elko because the kid was a two-way player and said, "Hey, I think this kid can be a good player and we should take him." And Elko was like, "Yeah, he's a nice player, but like I don't want him. I have other priorities. Derek Allen, Houston Griffith, right? There was other priorities in the class." So Polian, essentially, from what I've been able to gather from talking to multiple people, is he was basically able to tell Chip that no, Elko wants him, and they told Elko that no, Chip wants him. And so then one day Chip walks in and he sees that kid on the offensive board, and he was like, nope, told you I didn't want that kid, right? And so you're now screwed. Well, what Notre Dame did with that one is they just kind of let the kid make a decision to leave, and he didn't have a spot basically, but they let him stay in the class until he did it. But like now with the advent of Twitter, when a kid like TJ Sheffield commits, everybody's tweeting about it, and you got to pretty much handle that pretty quickly so the kid gets embarrassed. And that was on the Notre Dame coach at the time, not on TJ Sheffield. And you feel terrible for the kid, right? That's because there was a lack of communication and a lack of having a good cohesive plan that everybody was on the same page on. This staff, in my opinion, is much more on the same page. Although not all coaches are pulling their weight, everybody knows, like, we almost had a situation like this in the summer. Yes. That the defensive coordinator was going to take a commitment from a kid that the rest of the staff had not kind of given the okay for. And so there was some things that had happened that led people to think this kid thought he was going to come to Notre Dame commit, and Notre Dame wasn't willing to take his commitment. The decision makers weren't ready to take his commitment, and the kid got his feelings hurt, and rightfully so. And I felt terrible for the kid, but that's why it's important that everybody be on the same page, because you forget the embarrassment part, or you don't want to hurt a kid, and hurt and burn that bridge. There's just no need for it. So you got to have really healthy communication, in my opinion, Ryan, and at every position. But you need a big board too.
I felt really bad for TJ Sheffield because I remember that story, and I was happy to see that he was contributing for Purdue and doing a pretty good job. So I was very happy to see that, because I felt terrible for that kid, man. The one in the summer,
yeah, it wasn't his fault, right?
The one in the summer was that sucked.
Just unnecessary. That whole situation, it's just unnecessary.
Sucked. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Here we go. We got one from Broke Neck Boy here.
Question: It's funny when people try to compare Notre Dame's success to the SEC, an entire conference, even though there was one school with more national championships than Notre Dame, who was 3-5 against Notre Dame.
Even though there was one school with more. I think he's talking about Alabama there.
I would assume.
Yeah.
I would assume.
So yeah. Look, history is defined by recency. When people are having these conversations, I mean, you say, well, Notre Dame has a winning record over Alabama. I'm pretty sure it's talking about Alabama. Let me just go here and check real quick. But I don't think Bear Bryant. I don't think Bear Bryant ever beat Notre Dame. Now that I think about it, I think they had a win in 1986. Was Alabama's first win over Notre Dame, and I don't think that Bear was the coach on that team. It was Ray Perkins was the coach on that team. So Bear was 0 against Notre Dame. They beat them in 73 in the Sugar Bowl. Notre Dame beat them in 75 in the Orange Bowl. They beat them in 76 in South Bend, beat them in 1980 in Birmingham. And then Alabama's won 3 of the last 4. But here's the deal. Nobody cares about Notre Dame beating Alabama in the 1970s. Just don't care. People care about what's happened in the last decade. In the last decade, Notre Dame against the best SEC schools has gone 0 for 2 against Georgia, 0 for 2 against Alabama. Now, they've beaten everybody else. And nobody else in the SEC has beaten them. They beat South Carolina. They beat LSU twice. They beat Vanderbilt. I mean, so they've won those games, but those aren't the games that you're defined by at Notre Dame. You're defined by how you did against Georgia and Alabama.
Right.
That's just the reality of it. Just like at Michigan, you're not defined by you beat Michigan State every year. You're defined by, do you beat Ohio State or not? And that's the thing is Notre Dame has played Alabama on the big stage twice in the last decade, and Alabama smacked them both times. And, they were much more competitive against Georgia, but they lost. And so, I mean, that's what people are going to do until you start beating them. It's as simple as that. You're going to have to deal with this stuff until Notre Dame wins. And when Notre Dame starts wins, that's basically where it comes from. Here's one. Let me get back up here. I'll answer this one here from John A1. If Hartman wins the Heisman Trophy, would he be bigger than Brady Quinn at Notre Dame? That only happens, John, if he wins a championship. Look, Brady Quinn is a legend in Notre Dame for a lot of reasons. One, he's got an Irish name. He came from, I think the name of his high school was, I think they were the Irish. I think that's Dublin Kaufman is an Irish type of school. I think that's true. He played for a long time. He was kind of part of the revival for a period of time at Notre Dame. He was a warrior. He was just played his butt off, and he was a really big, tall, strapping, good-looking guy that represents everything that you think Notre Dame should be about, right? Graduated in 4 years or in 3 years with 2 degrees, all academic, all-American type of guy, winner, all that stuff. And so I don't think Sam Hartman the only way Sam Hartman to me has any chance to become bigger than Brady Quinn is if he wins a championship. I think, and even then it's debatable.
Yeah.
Because it's what Brady did over the period of his entire career and is still doing. I mean, part of the reason Notre Dame is going to be able to compete on the NIL sphere with the kids who aren't looking for the immediate paydays is what Brady Quinn is doing with the NIL, with the collective he's working on. I don't even think it's a collective, with the fund that he's working on, right? His love for Notre Dame, he didn't just impact Notre Dame in the 4 years he was here. He's impacted it since he's left. But it would –
yeah.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think that's a key point, though, that you're making, Brian, is the fact that, look, I think it's cliche to say sometimes, but Brady Quinn's a Notre Dame guy, man. I mean, from the start to the finish, right? I mean, he came here, played his entire career at Notre Dame, continues to love the program, to support the program. And I think that he has become almost mythical with how people think about him, right? I mean, Brady Quinn was incredible to watch. He was one of my favorite players, kind of through the fandom, but then also the fact of what he continues to do for the program. I mean, that's just it's the longevity stuff, man. I honestly don't think, and this is no I don't think Trevor Lawrence could come here for 1 year and become more beloved than Brady Quinn. I just don't think that's realistic. I just don't.
It would have to be Heisman, 39, 4,000 yards, and a national championship. It'd have to be
like a Cam Newton, Auburn type of thing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Honestly, Ryan, it'd have to be something like that. Joe Burrow at LSU. I mean, he was only there 2 years, but he's a legend because he won a championship, right? I mean, if Burrow has the same stats that he had, and they get knocked out by Oklahoma in the semifinal, they don't talk about Joe the way that they do now. Even just 3 years later, it'd have to be a championship, and even then, I still don't know. He would be that now, but in 5 years, it'd be like, hey, remember Brady Quinn? It would be that, in my opinion. I think it would be that. But that's a really good question. And you know what, John? I hope we get to find out. Because if Sam Hartman wins the Heisman Trophy, Notre Dame is really freaking good this year and is a playoff team.
Yes. With what you think the run game is going to be on top of if he has Heisman worthy numbers passing wise, Yep.
Irish in Ohio. this is a really good question. He says, Brian and Ryan, neither of you were originally high on Hartman. Was there someone else in the portal you guys originally wanted, or someone you wanted that did not enter the portal? Have a good weekend, guys. I know for me, Ryan, the guy that I really wanted early on that I hoped would jump in the portal is Tyler Van Dyke. That was my guy kind of from the beginning, because I was like, that kid's got a lot of tools to be a really good college quarterback in this system. But he obviously never jumped in the portal. That was the guy that I kind of looked at early on as like, oh, I'd love to have that guy because he can throw the deep ball. I think the system fits him. I think the players that are on the roster fit him. I think getting him out of that insane, cancerous offensive culture, which who knows what that's going to be next year, because they just fired Josh Gaddis, which is
for
wild.
1 year.
Wild,
man.
I had a buddy tell me that he's reading reports from that he hasn't been like doing any recruiting the last few weeks. Like this apparently was expected. Like I have a feeling what's going to come out is they needed to fire him by a certain date to, it's going to be some kind of, like when UConn waited to fire Bob Diaco till a certain date because then they wouldn't have to pay him as much money. I wouldn't shock me if it's something like that.
That's
with Josh
wild,
Gaddis.
That's wild. But I mean, the name that I really liked early on that never entered the portal was Michael Pratt from Tulane. I've really liked Michael Pratt a ton. I was good with Hudson Card too. Like I would have been okay with Hudson Card.
I was good with it, but I think that Hartman's, as I studied the film, Hartman's the better pick there. And by the way, Notre Dame would have got Sam Hudson Card if they wanted him.
Right.
Just so people understand. He went to Purdue, for Pete's sake.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
They absolutely, and he pursued Notre Dame. Hudson Card, we'll say this now, Hudson Card pursued Notre Dame. But Notre Dame just kind of had they liked his talent, but they just need, like, to me, Hudson Card's a not as good version of Tyler Buckner. Not very experienced, doesn't play a lot of ball, kind of a playmaker. A more experienced, not as talented version of Tyler Buckner, to me. He's got ability, but hasn't played a ton of football. Are we really sure he's the guy that's going to come in and be that guy? And the answer at the end of the day was no. And I was asked this question once by somebody. He said, where would you put Card on your list? And I said, I really don't have him on my list. I like him a lot, but of the names that I just was given, he'd be at the bottom of my list because of those guys. I know who they are. I know what they're going to be. And if you're going to go with a guy that you don't know what he's going to be, go with Tyler Buckner. You know what I mean? And then go get a good backup quarterback, somewhere like Ohio State did, that kind of guy. But, go get Keaton Slovis or something as a backup in case Tyler gets hurt or something like that. But if you're going to go for a portal quarterback to come in and be the guy, you've got to get somebody that is a proven player. And Sam Hartman was without question the best on the board for that, and even if you didn't take some of the other things that we had heard about Devin Leary, the reality is Devin Leary's injury history is just too much. There's just too much. You couldn't go with that, Ryan. I mean, just what are you getting? It's not like he broke his ankle or tore his knee up last year. It's a shoulder. It's a upper body thing. Yeah. Yeah. So you couldn't take that chance. You just couldn't take that chance.
I will say to the question, my hesitancy with Sam Hartman early on, and I admitted this kind of on the board, I think, or maybe I said it on the show, I was evaluating him too much from an NFL perspective. I was. Sure. I looked at him and I said, he's not incredibly gifted. He's 6'1", 210, middling size. He doesn't have the strongest arm of all time. He's an okay athlete, not great. But I mean, the point blank to it is, and the interceptions are something that he needs to kind of get a hold of a little bit, right, in that system. But what turned me around is that then I looked at it from a different perspective. Kid's thrown 77 touchdowns in 2 years, right? He's a leading touchdown passer in ACC history. Sam Hartman might never be an NFL quarterback to the highest degree, but he's a really good college quarterback. Like, there's no doubt. And for immediate return for next year, we'll talk about a proven commodity. I have a really good idea of what I am going to expect out of Sam Hartman. I think there's a really, really high baseline with a player like that because he's done everything you need him to do, man. Like if a Notre Dame quarterback gives me what Sam Hartman's been over the last few years, they're going to be a really good team. If he takes a step, then you're going to be a tough team to beat. Like that's the point blank period to it, right? So I think that it was just a different different vantage point I looked at from Sam Hartman that changed my opinion on him a little bit. I misevaluated what was important in his skill set early.
My miss, Ryan, too, was obviously is I've watched him play a lot, but it's like kind of watching him play as I'm just watching the game, right? And you see the misses. You see the like, dude, how did he miss that? Like you see all the sacks he takes. And then, you see that stupid mesh, and I absolutely hate that. And then you break the film down and you're like, okay, that receiver ran that route wrong, or he's not able to set his feet and make that throw because the mesh is taking him into the line and he's got to try to throw while like jumping in the air sometimes to get over the line. And you start to see a lot of those things. You say, hey, look, when he's able to do the things that will be asked of him in the Notre Dame system, he's pretty good. And he can run this system really well. You watch how well he throws the deep ball. You watch how well he's going to look, the receivers are going to have a mentality of you can't take plays off like we saw from them last year because you don't know when Sam's going to throw you the ball. Or where, or hey, I'm covered, so I'm gonna stop running. No, you're covered. He's gonna throw that ball up and give you a chance. And if the receivers don't fight for balls, he's gonna throw picks. I think that hurt him at times too. Ryan, is a good number of the picks he had to me were mesh scheme related picks, as opposed to him just making a lot of dumb decisions. He'll make some. He'll force some balls now. Don't get it twisted. He'll force some balls. You're like, dude, come on, man. What are you throwing that ball for?
I know. But, I hate the mesh. Yeah. Mesh is stupid.
Yep.
I saw someone said it worked for Wake. Wake Forest isn't very good at running the football. So does it really work for Wake?
It doesn't.
Does it really?
No. It works for them because they have good receivers, but they don't have a lot of speed at receiver.
Yeah.
And what that has allowed them to do is kind of get into their routes and get free.
Yeah.
That's going to be the big difference for Sam Hartman is, with all due respect to A.T. Perry and Sage Surratt, those guys don't run like the Notre Dame kids run, in my opinion. And, we'll see if I'm right on that or not. But I think that's going to be a thing that he's going to really like is there's speed. There's some speed to work with out of the backfield and a receiver to me. So let's get to some more here. We got this one from I'll answer this one quickly from John A1. Ryan, if you have an opinion, you can share it. Would Brandon Wimbush's career at Notre Dame been any different if Tommy Rees was his quarterback coach his entire career? I don't think so. It'd have been different. He'd have been better, but not worlds better because I don't know if Tommy really knows how to coach that type of quarterback yet, but I definitely think he'd have been better. Brandon Wimbush was a much better quarterback in high school than he was in Notre Dame because he didn't get ruined by Mike Sanford yet. So, but the other thing too is for Brandon to have been coached by Tommy Rees, Tommy would have been 2 years out of his playing career.
Sure.
Now, this version of Tommy Rees, sure. But at the time, Tommy would have been like 24 the first year's coaching Brandon, 25. He wasn't ready to be that guy yet. I don't think he was ready to be that guy in 2017, right? But he's not the same guy now that he was in 2017. He was 25, 26 in 2017. I think he was better, but I still don't know if that's the type of quarterback that he is best suited for, in my opinion. But Tyler Buckner will be that chance to kind of prove it because there's some similarities there between Tyler and Brandon, in my opinion, as players. All right, here we got one from Zach Martin here, Ryan, about the bowl game.
Yep, he said, Zach said, rewatch the South Carolina game. Does Brandon Hillman, or other have the skill set to add a wrinkle similar to DeCarrion Joyner, Wildcat with an actual threat in the passing game?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, Brandon Hillman can throw the football now. I mean, Brandon Hillman's not Jalen Elliott as a quarterback. I mean, Jalen could throw, but Jalen was an athletic kid that was asked to throw the football. Brandon Hillman can –
I forgot Elliott was a high school quarterback.
Yeah, he didn't play DB till his senior year.
Yeah.
The thing about Brandon Hillman is he's not a Power 5 quarterback. Brandon Hillman could be an FCS quarterback. Like if I'm James Madison, well, they're not there anymore, but if I'm like Richmond or all the
James Madison even now. James Madison even now could probably still use him at quarterback.
Sure.
To be honest.
Old Dominion could maybe use him now as a quarterback. But definitely like when those schools were FCS schools, William and Mary, Richmond, teams like that. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. He could play at that level, which means he could do that. Yeah, I think so. I absolutely think so. Would I use him there? I don't know. It's kind of gimmicky, If you're playing a team that you don't think you can beat.
Talent too.
Yeah. But if like with that kid, they didn't have him playing quarterback though, right? They just kind of put him in as a wrinkle, the Joyner kid.
Well, and I honestly, I don't love how they use Joyner because every time they give Joyner the football, man, he makes a play, but it's just like he's in such a niche role that he just doesn't touch the football enough, Like Brendan Hillman, I think, makes a bigger impact as a full-time safety than he does as a niche gadget player. That's just where I am with it.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to these some more. We got one from Seth Clark here, Ryan.
Seth says, who are your early recruiting crushes in 2024 recruiting cycle on defense? DeMello
I got
Jones
a new
is an early one for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a new one, and it's the Leonard Moore kid. I broke his film down yesterday, put an update, just not an update, but like a just sort of an evaluation of him on the message board. I like that kid a lot.
Yeah.
I'd take that kid now. If he wanted to commit this weekend, Ryan, I'd take it. I'd take his commitment right now. Partly because of how well Mike Mickens has recruited in the past. You know, you can kind of take a little bit of a flyer on a kid, you know, but I watched him. He can run. He's super long. His transitions, when his technique is right, are really good. He's got a lot of technical things he's got to clean up. Like a lot of technical things he's got to clean up. But man, that kid's got some tools now.
Yes.
Is he where Benjamin Morrison was? No. But he's got some tools, man. I honestly, and then also, Ryan, you and I have talked a lot about this. If I'm going to err on the side of taking the kid, I'm taking the kid from Texas, right? I mean, I just think that's a state Notre Dame needs to get into. Plays against very good competition. He's one of mine. He's one of my early crushes. Another one's a kid that Notre Dame's not going to get. They are visiting him today, and if you're on the message board, if you read the article we put out, they are visiting him today. Jayshon Ross is a kid I absolutely love. Notre Dame's not right now, has no shot to get him, but I absolutely love that kid as a player. Love that kid as a player. He's another one that I like quite a bit in this class, Ryan.
Yeah. Leonard Moore is a really good one because guys, if you want to see, you want to ask length, right? What's length look like? Go watch Leonard Moore's film before the snap happens, man. His arms are like down by his ankles, man. It's wild.
Man,
He's
crazy.
so long.
Crazy.
DeMello Jones is one for me.
Oh,
out of
yeah.
the state of Georgia.
D. Cooper's nephew.
And he is a 6'1", 175-pound safety that can also play wide receiver, can play wildcat quarterback. He is being recruited by Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and most of them have offered him as an athlete to play either on the offensive or defensive side of the football. Some like him at corner. Alabama likes him at safety. Notre Dame, likes him at safety. He's a really good athlete all around, can change direction well, and he comes up with violence, man. He's got some strike to him. I love that kid. DeMello Jones is a really talented football player out of Georgia.
I like that kid quite a bit. I keep seeing people saying he's 155 pounds. Nobody that I know of lists him at 155 pounds.
Yeah, where's that come from?
I don't know where that's coming from. I've seen that was said on the message board as well. Somebody said 155 pounds, he's going to have to fill out. Number one, you look at him, he's not 155 pounds. I'm checking his huddle now because maybe that's on there, but that would have been when he put it on there, like when he first created his huddle account. Yeah, it's on his huddle account, 6'1", 155 pounds. I promise you that's what he was when he made his huddle account, which was probably like 2 years ago. So, because I was like, where are people getting this from? I just looked at that. He's not 155 pounds. He's at least 175 pounds right now to me when I look at him. When I look at pictures of him and when I watch him on the field. But it doesn't change the point of what is said is he definitely still needs to get stronger and get in the weight room, but he's a very willing tackler as well. Honestly, Ryan, part of the reason I like him is I think he can play field corner. I think he's got the range. He's got range like Cam Hart. He's got some of the coverage instincts that Benjamin Morrison has, although we don't, because remember, Benjamin Morrison was a great press man cover guy at Notre Dame, but he didn't do a lot of that for Bro Free Prep. He rarely came up and played press man. You could just see he understood routes. He could flip his hips. He could run. He could close. He's not as good as Benjamin Morrison, but I see boundary skills. And honestly, I like him too, because if I wanted to be a pure cover one team, I'm putting that kid in center field and feeling pretty good about my ability to play number to number, and definitely cover the hashes. So I like the kid a lot, Ryan, and I think he brings some versatility to it. So I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, man, he's really good. There's a lot of kids I really like those so far. The Jackson Jones kid, the pass rusher that just decommitted from Oregon that Notre Dame's, on
love
a little
his
bit.
Film. I just wish he was a couple inches taller and a couple inches longer. I do.
Man,
but his film is fun to watch.
Bendy, man. He's bendy and explosive. I can get down with that kid.
He's a pretty good player. I'll tell you what, Ryan, a kid that I really like, and I don't know how to pronounce his last name. But I love that David Palapele kid. That's my best guess on how to pronounce his name. I love that kid.
It's David Palapele.
David,
I'm
is that how you say it?
I don't know, actually.
I love that kid's film. Again, 3-star kid, but that's the perfect kind of nose. 6'2", 305. You give me him or TJ Lindsey at nose in this class, and I'm feeling really good about the nose tackle pickup in this class. No question about it. No question about it.
We were joking in our group text yesterday, remember, about like, imagine him and Justin Scott inside. It's just like, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we were talking about that last night. Yeah, absolutely. Here's one from John A1. Which opponent would be the sweetest payback bowl victory for Notre Dame? Bama, LSU, Oklahoma, OU. I'm gonna assume he's talking about Ohio State on one of those, or Michigan. I mean, the only school that Notre Dame has to pay back in those two ones is Ohio State and Bama. And for me, bowl victory would be Bama, because you're going to get a chance to beat Ohio State in the regular season. Yes.
That's number one for me, man, is Bama. I mean, 2012 still stings me, man. It does. I'm not going to lie about it. Like, it sucks. Yeah. 2020 wasn't nearly as bad. 2012.
Because I thought the 2012 team could compete with them. I did. I thought they could compete with Bama. I thought the 2020 team needed to play their best game of the year to have a chance to beat Alabama.
Yeah.
But yeah. And just what that would mean for this program to beat Alabama in a bowl game would be huge. A major bowl game would be huge. I mean, what payback does Notre Dame need to give LSU? They took the coach I didn't want here anymore, and Notre Dame has beat them the last 2 times they've played. What payback does Notre Dame have for LSU? They stole the punter, like Jay Bramlett. Like, I don't know what Notre Dame has to do to pay back LSU. So LSU's done me nothing but favors the last year and a half. So thanks the last year and a couple months. So I got no payback for them. Let's see here. Let me get down to a few more here real quick. Oh, here's a good one, Ryan. Ryan, how do you feel about the Utah tight end going before Michael Mayer in a mock draft? That would be the one from Daniel Jeremiah. And you told me about this. You're going to see that more and more and more from some of these mock draft people.
Michael Mayer's brand doesn't sell. I mean, and I'm not saying DJ's a clickbait guy. Like, I'm not. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is that Michael Mayer's brand. I had somebody literally on Twitter yesterday say this to me, Brian. It was like, "Oh, you don't take unathletic tight ends in the first round." I'm like, first and foremost, Michael Mayer's a pretty dang good athlete, man. First and foremost. Second, that's why people draft Mike Gesicki over Dallas Goedert, right? That's why that happens, because you look for the flash. And I honestly, I'm going to put it like this, man. I had someone say something of, Dalton Kincaid is better in and out of breaks than Michael Mayer. I'm like, yeah, one's 240 and one's 265. If he wasn't better in and out of breaks, that's a major issue, sir. For first and foremost, why are we comparing apples to oranges? They're not the same player. It's not going to look.
And I still think that's debatable.
I think it is too, because I think that people misunderstand Michael Mayer getting in and out of breaks because they look at him and they're like, there's some tightness at times. It's like, but yeah, he's 265 pounds. It's not always going to be super smooth. But then you'll see him break off a route and you're like, oh, he can get out of breaks. Yes. He can. Yes. He can. So I think it's ridiculous. I do. I think it's ridiculous. I think the only thing that Dalton Kincaid may have in Michael Mayer is that he might be slightly, and I don't even think it's that crazy of a margin. He might be slightly better straight line fast than Michael Mayer. Michael Mayer, though, is a better blocker. He's better. I mean, Dalton Kincaid doesn't block for one. He doesn't even, they don't use him that way. Michael Mayer has a bigger frame. Obviously, we talked about that. He's better in the air. He's a better blocker. He's more physical. I mean, I just don't understand what we're doing, man. I just don't understand what we're doing. I could at least, Brian, I put it like this. I think the Darnell Washington stuff is also dumb, but at least I can look at Darnell Washington and say, he is a better blocker than Michael Mayer. That's cool. At least there's something he's better at than Michael Mayer, right? The Dalton Kincaid thing, there's nothing that I think he's better at than Michael Mayer. Like, there's nothing.
And his ball skills aren't even in the same stratosphere as Michael Mayer.
No.
He was a system-generated kid, right? And that's the thing is, like, Michael Mayer did what he did with different core. I mean, you put Michael Mayer on that Utah team with the talent around him against that schedule, and, He's doing some pretty darn good things, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's
just
comical. It really is, but it's not to be unexpected. I mean, Ryan, you know this. You mentioned it the other day. There's the whole paralysis by analysis thing, right?
Yes.
And you know, I look at it. Who would you say are probably the two best defenses that Dalton Kincaid played this year? Would you say that they're most talented, athletic, whatever? Would you agree with me that it's Florida and Oregon State?
Yeah.
Oregon's in there, USC's in there.
I might put Oregon over Florida.
Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah.
So here's what he did in those 3 games. I'll give those 3 games. Against Florida, he had 2 catches for 29 yards. Against Oregon State, he had 3 catches for 17 yards. He had 11 catches against Oregon for 99 yards.
Yeah.
9 yards a catch.
Yes.
4 for 35 for 8.7 against Stanford. Right? He had 16 catches for – this is where he made his money. People are obsessed with the game he had against USC. 16 catches for 234 yards. That's what they're obsessed with. And that's – and he's new, right? That's the thing is he's new. He kind of broke out this year.
Yeah.
And so there's the hype of that. Whereas Michael Mayer's they've been evaluating Michael Mayer for 3 years. And now they're picking apart every little part of his game.
And I hate the conversation, and I hate the conversation back and forth on Twitter because I don't dislike Dalton Kincaid. I don't. Right. He's a top 5 tight end in this class. Sure. No doubt.
And this class is pretty good because it's a pretty good tight end class.
It is a good class. But the fact of the matter is I don't think anybody's even close to Michael Mayer. Like, bias aside, because, I mean, you could look at – I'll tell you this right now. Isaiah Foskey's not going to be crazy high on my edge rankings right now. He's not. Right. I mean, that's just personally, right? It's
There's actually a lot of – Mel Kiper thinks a lot more of Isaiah Foskey right now than you do. You think he's more of a round 3 guy. Mel Kiper had him in his first round of his draft.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a 2nd or 3rd round player right now. Isaiah Foskey on the field, talent level, he's a 1st rounder. Sure. But I mean, again, we're at some point that has to actualize itself, in my opinion, right? But I mean, I just don't see what you can look at and say that guy's like not even Dalton Kincaid. I'm taking it to Darnell Washington. I've seen people put Luke Musgrave in this conversation from Oregon State. I'm just like, look, man, Luke Musgrave's a nice little athlete. He's got some developmental potential. He's not Michael Mayer, man. Like, he's not. He's just not. I mean, Brian, you saw it, right, man? It was like one of the first games Michael Mayer saw it, like, played at Notre Dame. You're just like, yep, that guy's different, man. He's just different. It's just easy to see that guy's different. And yeah, I don't know, whatever.
I think the other thing too for me, Ryan, I think the only guy in my opinion that belongs in the conversation with Mayer is Darnell Washington, simply because he's such a freak athletically. If the light goes on for him, he could be really, really good, right? Yeah. That's the only guy to me that if you're going to talk to me about him, I wouldn't agree with you, but I'd at least, okay.
And at least he has a baseline where you can say he's going to be a dominant blocker at the next level. Even if he never becomes a high-volume pass catcher, you're like, okay, but he could still be Bubba Franks or Mercedes Lewis, right? Which is still a good football player. It's still good. It's just you might have to supplement in the passing game a little bit if that's all he is as a pass catcher, right? If he's a 40-catch guy on a season, you might need to get a second tight end. So that kind of ups that production a little bit. That's just where we are.
Let's get on to some more here, Ryan. Super chat from Adam Shipley.
Of the current roster, including incoming freshmen, who has the highest ceiling and who has the highest floor on the defensive line and linebacker position groups?
Well, we talked about this yesterday. D-line's easy for me, Ryan. Highest floor, Devin Houston. Highest ceiling, Boubacar Traore. I think you have one. I think your ceiling is different than mine, correct?
Yeah, I mean, my conversations between Armel Mukam and Boubacar Traore, like, I think that they're pretty close. I think that you honestly can flip-flop those guys. I agree 100%, though. I think Devin Houston has the highest floor.
Charles Jagusah is both for me on offense. I think he has the highest floor and the highest ceiling. Yeah.
Yes.
Sam Pendleton probably be number 2 for me on floor.
He's got a high floor. Yeah. Charles Jagusah, man, he looked so good as a senior. And it's crazy to think that he was playing with a knee injury after the second game of the season. Yeah. I mean, that kid's going to be special, man. He's going to be special.
Let's keep him healthy. JJ Goodway with Super Chat. JJ, thank you very, very much. I'll ask you this one, Ryan. How would you break up the quarterbacks in the spring game? Which players are paired together?
I mean, we talked about this, right? Like, I didn't have like a substantial opinion on this, but I think that more that we kind of talk through it, you on one side you have Tyler to begin the game. On the other side, you have Sam Hartman. That's where it is. And then, I mean, how would I pair the rest of it? I mean, it doesn't really matter either way. I want the second half to be a large influx of Steve Angeli, Kenny Minchie. I want to see those guys. So I don't really care. I don't care if Minchie's on Sam Hartman's team or if he's on Tyler Buckner's team. Regardless, I just want them to be spread out and to get as many reps as possible, obviously.
All right, let's get to some more questions here. We'll kind of work through some of these as quickly as we can. Yep. Coach Koch, here's one. I'll ask this, Ryan, because this is one you'll have a better feeling on for me than me. He says, "What do you think of the Princeton preferred walk-on? That'd be Cole Aubrey, correct, or Audrey? Is it Aubrey or Audrey? Aubrey. He is obviously determined to play for Notre Dame. Any chance he cracks the rotation?"
Coach Koch, it's a good question.
We're talking defense or special teams, because the answer is different.
Yes. So he's a kid that's interesting in the sense that he's had some production. But, I mean, the point-blank period to it, and as I had a chance to talk to him last night, and I'll have kind of a piece on him pretty soon, but he's a kid that understands his role, I think. You know, he talked to me about whether it is as a rotational player or a scout team player or a special teams player, he's going to work his butt off, and he's going to do whatever it needs to do to be an asset to the team. So, I mean, for me, just kind of looking at him briefly, I don't think he's going to crack a defensive rotation. I think that he's going to be a key special teamer, which is going to be great. And I think he is a kid, though, that from a depth perspective can at least give you a look as an inside linebacker and could play some Viper for you, especially on like scout team opportunities and do all that type of stuff. So I think he's going to be a versatile player that can play multiple spots, but his real role on this team in 2023, in my opinion, is as a special teamer.
Agree. Here's a question that we can answer somewhat quickly. This is from David Loy. Says, what were our classes ranked during the Weiss era? So just real quick, really, Rivals is the only outlet that still exists from then. Scout's gone. I don't even know if ESPN has archived theirs back that long. 247 didn't start till, I think, 2010 or 11. So it's really Rivals. And their Charlie's first full class was the 2006 class, which finished 8th. The 2007 class, that was the Jimmy Clausen class. That class finished 8th. They signed, was it like 2 or 3 5-stars? 1 5-star. So that'd be Jimmy. I thought Golden Tate, ESPN had Golden Tate ranked like 14th and had Gary Neal ranked, or Gary Gray ranked in the top 25 as well. The 2008 class finished 2nd. The 2009 class was one that actually, here's what's funny. The lowest ranked class that they had was the 09 class, which finished 21st. That class produced, you want to hear who was in that class? Okay. Tyler Eifert, Zach Martin, Manti Te'o, Chris Watt, Sierra Wood, Theo Riddick, Zeke Mata. So yeah, that was the low-ranked class. By the way,
I haven't heard Zeke Mata's name in a while. Man.
Yeah, Zeke Mata was a good college football player. And then his last class, I mean, you really can't count. But, I mean, look, that class finished 14th. But in a lot of the guys they got, I mean, he got TJ Jones. He got Bennett Jackson. Charlie's staff did. They got Tommy Reese and Andrew. Tommy Reese was committed to them. I think Andrew Hendricks was as well. Kendall Moore, Prince Shembo. Lewis Nix committed when they didn't have a coach. So
that's wild.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. Tony Alford recruited him when they didn't have a coach. He committed between Charlie being fired and Kelly being hired. So yeah. Yep. JM Jonesy 80. Here's one.
Yep. The question is, Brian, one thing you didn't discuss on your linebacker Golden show was the cross training. Besides the scheme being complicated, I think having the linebackers learn 2 or 3 spots hurt their development also.
I think there's merit to that. I think but honestly though, but it's not what I would say is I don't think cross training by itself hinders development. I think it's how you teach cross training, how you teach it, right? Is there so much cross training that they never figure out anything, or they're practicing 80% of the time at this position and then 20% of the time they're working this other thing. So I didn't go to any of the practices. I couldn't tell you how they worked on cross training. So I can't in good conscience answer that question. I think hindsight 2020, we can look back at all the issues and say, I think that might have been a problem, and there's merit to that. but I can't say for sure because I see teams that cross train all the time and it works well. And so it would have to be, are you allowing them to master one at first and foremost? That would be kind of the thing for me, is I would want to see how they did it. So,
yep.
Yeah. Hey, reminder, hit that like button, subscribe, people, share it, of course. Logan Thayer, this would be one for you, Ryan. Here's a good one. I don't know if this is true or not, so I'm going to ask you. When Brian Dabble started with the Giants, he scripted plays designated to get Daniel Jones to fail and Tyrod Taylor succeed, to see how Jones responded. Sometimes coaches need to give that extra push. I've never heard that, Ryan. Did you ever hear that?
I've never heard that either. It's an interesting kind of what we call a psychological test, I guess, right? I mean, you're trying to see how a guy responds to adversity, which I think is very interesting. I mean, I definitely have seen coaches that have tried to put players through like the worst possible situations to see how they get out on the other side. But I haven't heard this specifically about Brian Daboll, but I think there's merit to it, right? I mean, to be a quarterback, especially, you need to be resilient, man. Like, you need to be able to fight through the fire and all those cliches that you hear. So if true, I think it's a very interesting idea to do, because I think that you need to know that, especially because we're talking about Daniel Jones specifically. Daniel Jones is about to come up on a contract opportunity, right? So especially if you're going to invest in a guy, I need to be sure that he's the guy, right? Like, I can't have any questions at that point.
I've said this all along for quarterbacks, especially but in practice, you have to have periods of practice that you set up for tougher. You're kind of setting them up to fail. You got to see how a quarterback's going to handle when his number 1 and number 2 and number 3 options aren't there, or when you're calling plays that are being run against a defense that's not suited for what you do. One of the mistakes that they made during the Brian Kelly era, I don't know if they did that this year or not. Again, wasn't at practices, but they did way too much setting the script up for them to have success. And that there's a time and place for that. But if you don't set them up for, we're not prepared for, like Harry Heastain, I was told, used to do this all the time in practice. He would just throw these stupid looks at his offensive linemen, just all these crazy looks during different periods, and just bring all these different stunts and blitzes during periods, because he's like, well, if you guys can pick all this up and know the rules, because there's certain rules that apply that kind of can prepare to pick up anything. But I'm going to throw some stuff at you. Maybe on Monday you get your butt kicked a little bit too, but by Thursday you've got this stuff picked up. And guess what? There's nothing they can throw at us on Saturday that's going to catch us off guard. But if all week you've been working on this one play against cover 2, and it works great against cover 2, but then you call the play and they go cover 4 or cover 3, and your quarterback doesn't know what to do because he's only ever seen the look against cover 2, then you did not prepare him to be successful. Yeah, and so that's why you've got to put him in those positions from time to time. If he throws a pick on Tuesday, then it's all good. But by Thursday, he knows where to go, and that's the key.
We used to do something similar when I coached too, Brian. Like, we would do the same stuff, just like throw out these stupid blitzes against offensive line, and you're like, that's not even in the playbook, man. Like, that's not even a thing, right? Like, that doesn't even make sense. But baptism by fire, man. Ultimately.
Yeah. Here's a question from Brandon Plensner. Says, are you concerned with the fact that Bryce Young has a Hall of Fame D-line for a dad, but doesn't have the technique or uses hands that one would hope he'd have? You think technique would be his main asset? I'll say this. I'm not worried about it. 2 reasons. Remember, that was one of my criticisms of Benjamin Morrison as a junior. His technique wasn't really great. And you remember his dad played in the NFL as a defensive back. The thing for Bryce Young is I don't think he's played football that long. Number one, I don't think he grew up playing football. I could be wrong on that, but I thought I remember seeing that. Number 2 is he's still learning how to just function like he's had a couple big growth spurts. It's a long, gangly kid who I don't think is quite coordinated to the level that he needs to be. I also don't think his hand play is as bad as some people make it out to be. But he's still just a junior in high school, and not every dad who's a Hall of Famer is out there every single day putting his kids through drills. Some dads just want to be dad. Archie Manning is that way. It's like, I'm sure he worked with the kids and all that, but it's like, I'm dad, right? I'm not your coach. I'm your dad. And, there's some of that too. And the other thing too is I don't think Bryce Young really adopted football as something he's passionate about until recently. And that's the other thing too, is especially if you're a dad who's my kid has to, because he's going to always be compared to me, my kid has to choose this path.
Sure.
And I'm to the point where I'm even going to take a hands-off approach because I need to know that when he does make that decision, that it was his decision. He wants to do this because he wants to blaze his own trail, and so it can be tricky, honestly, Brandon. I think it's a very fair question. I think it's a very good question. It's just not something that necessarily concerns me a whole lot, to be honest with you. It helped Joe Alt, right? But the fact that it's not the case here, it just doesn't concern me a whole lot.
Especially for his age. I think that's the key thing, right? I mean, he's grown into his body. Like you said, he's still a kid that does look a little awkward movement. Like he's a good mover, but like you can see he's still growing into his frame. He's still growing into his body. I think for me, especially, we're talking about a junior in high school. At the core, Brian, like I'm looking for kids that have unteachables, right? Like I'm looking for guys that have the athleticism, the length, those things that you can't change. You can't change that. You can't really coach that up. I can coach up hand play. I can coach up a better stance. I can coach up a better get off. Like those things are things that I can work on. There's nothing unteachable that Bryce Young lacks, right? He's a long kid. He's pretty explosive. He's got a nice profile to develop. It's just about the teachables that you can give to him. So I'm not as worried just because of his age. If I was an NFL coach and he was like 26, I'd be like, sure. I don't know if he's ever going to quite get this. But at 16 or 17 years old.
If he doesn't have a bit of a jump as a senior, then I'm, now that he's embracing football more, Brandon, then I'd be a little bit more concerned, to be honest with you. Let's see here real quick. I want to get to some more. Indy Irish 25 asks, does LSU win a natty in the next 3 years? And do they win because of BK or in spite of it? Number one, I don't think that they are going to win a title. I don't. But if they do, it would be because of Brian Kelly. I mean, you can't look. I dislike the guy, but if he didn't walk into a situation with a loaded roster, he had to go get a bunch of transfers and all that kind of stuff. If they go win a title, it's because he put a staff in place to go win a title, right? It's not like he's walking into the 2019 roster and you're like, dude, like, okay, Larry Coker, like, of course you won a championship, right? You'd have to give him credit for that, in my opinion. And now, again, is he going to do everything possible to get them there? No. There's always going to be some, but, that's one of the benefits of being LSU. I was told this by all the LSU people. It's so much easier to recruit at LSU. Oh, okay. Well, then he has no excuses then, right? I mean, so he should be able to go win then because he has no excuses. But honestly, if he wins, he'll have a role in it. Certainly, he'll deserve credit for that. I just don't think he's going to win one. That's my thing. Here's another interesting one from Brandon. Out of all the new offers these past 3 weeks, who are 5 guys that intrigue you the most or the guys you'd want Notre Dame to get? I'm going Darian Mayo, TJ Moore, Benedict Ume, Mello Jones, and Daniel Freitag. Well, 2 guys for sure on that list are guys that I would want for sure. I like Mayo a lot, but TJ Moore and DeMello Jones are 2 for sure that I'd love to have.
I do like your list, Brandon, because Benedict Ume is a kid that I'm very interested in. I don't know if I would push for him if I was Notre Dame, just because it's a big defensive line board right now, man. There's a lot of talent on that board. So I don't know if I would prioritize him, obviously, but I think he's very talented, and I would continue to recruit him because he's another kid that could take a big rise because he's raw, but he is very talented. DeMello Jones is one for sure. Like, DeMello Jones would be a take for me yesterday. Like, yes, make that one happen. Leonard Moore is someone that Brian knows.
He's one of my 3. He's one of my 3, no doubt about it. Honestly, Ryan, my only concern with Daniel Freitag is I like him, but my concern would be, is he really going to be dead set on playing football? That would be one of my kind of my hangups on him a little bit. Honestly, would be that. Offensive line wise, I mean, I like a couple of the offers have been thrown out. I kind of like the Styles Prescott kid. I mean, he's not like, oh my gosh, you got to go get that kid. If they push for him and get him, great. If they don't, I'm all good. But that's a good offer. I think that's a good offer.
Sure.
And then the 5th one for me, Ryan, is I really like the Darren Dupree kid, the running back from Illinois.
I like Dupree too.
I like him quite a bit. That would be my other one.
He's a good one. Darren Dupree is a good one.
Davis Andrews is another one that I he's not my,
he's interesting. He's interesting.
I might have to put him over Styles Prescott because he could be a rover, could maybe be a safety. I'm not quite sure where, but he's that kid's athletic, rangy, and a good football player. Really good football player.
Agree. I know Brandon mentioned Darian Mayo. He's a really toolsy kid.
Yeah.
Really toolsy.
I guess he's not on my list because I just don't get my hopes up about the DC kids anymore. You know what I mean? So, he's got some tools, man.
I'll give you one. Brian was the Platt kid, the Braden Platt out of Washington.
Is that the running back linebacker kid?
Yes.
Yo, that kid can ball. Yeah.
Brian, he is a 214-foot javelin thrower too, man. What the heck?
Ume, Ryan, I haven't seen enough of to have an opinion on that one.
Yeah,
so
he's got some Stephon Tuitt in him. Not saying he'll be that, but he stylistically, I can see a little bit to it. The Platt kid, though, out of Washington, man, he is a ridiculous athlete. I mean, he's listed at there's a lot of different heights and weights on him, but he's got a verified 4.6 something in the 40, so he can run a little bit as a linebacker. But he's a 214-foot javelin thrower, 150-something foot discus thrower, and a 61-foot shot putter as a linebacker. That is wild stuff.
Well, there's no doubt. Here's a couple, Ryan, before you got to get out of here. Here's from Joel Gallegos. Says, I know Sammy Brown was a target at linebacker for Notre Dame, given I think he is a long shot to come out of Georgia. Has the staff moved on, or does Sammy keep things pretty tight-lipped?
So I have a decent relationship with Sammy Brown. I'll say this. Sammy Brown is definitely interested in Notre Dame in the sense that he's very intrigued. And I mean, he's been on a visit. He's planning another visit. The staff has been by to see him as well. And so, no, Joe, I'll say this. It's not like an all egg in one basket for Sammy Brown, right? Because I think that you understand that that's going to be a tough pull out of Georgia, man. Like, that would be a ridiculous pull. I don't think that Notre Dame will ultimately land Sammy Brown. But if you're Notre Dame staff, you don't stop recruiting Sammy Brown. The kid's a stud, man.
Because if you reach your numbers, Ryan, you still take him. If you're only wanting 3 linebackers and you land 3 linebackers and Sammy Brown wants to come to Notre Dame, you say, okay, we're taking 4 linebackers in this class.
Kid's a stud, man. There's always room for Sammy Brown. Yep. Always room for Sammy Brown.
Here's an interesting, Ryan. Let's go with this. Yep. And this is entire running back rooms. Give me your top 3. Rank the following running backs room from worst to first: Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Florida State, Penn State. Give me your top 3.
As an entire group, right? Entire
group. So not just 1, 2, entire group. Here's mine. Yep. I don't know if I'd say for sure in order, but it's Notre Dame, Penn State, and Michigan. The reason I'm going with those 3 over Ohio State is Ohio State's 1, 2, and then major question marks, right? Alabama has a good running back room. You're counting on freshmen that are good players, but I don't think are necessarily better than Jeremiah Love, where Jeremiah Love's going to have a hard time seeing the field. And then, Florida State's got a really good running back room, but they lost one of their running backs.
A really good one too.
Yeah.
Really
he transferred out. And so that's why, to me, Penn State's room went from probably second for me to third because they lost the number 3 running back.
Kayvon Lee.
Yeah. He transferred out. So their 1, 2 is as good as anybody's, I think, next year. But I'd probably go Michigan 1. And again, my issue with Michigan is their number 3 is, look, Notre Dame has the best 1 to 4. But the reason I give Michigan the edge there is because they have the one guy that's way more proven. Blake Corum is really good.
Really good.
And none of the Notre Dame guys have necessarily shown to that level yet. But so their 1, 2 is really good. I don't think the rest of theirs is as good as Notre Dame's, but that's one is a pretty big advantage for now. I could see it changing during the season, but for right now, that's where I'm at.
We would have the same 3. I would probably give Notre Dame the slight edge just because, again, it's to 4, right? To 5, to 6. Like, you have so much depth.
It's nuts.
You really do. I mean, but yeah, Michigan's 1-2 duo of Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, like, that's dumb, man. That's a really talented duo. But then Penn State, I mean, if we're talking about 2023, though, I mean, I expect Nick Singleton and the what's the other kid's name? The little scat back type. Yeah,
the scat back?
Katron Allen, right? Isn't he a 200-pound kid?
I thought he was bigger than that, but I could be having him confused with the kid that left.
Yeah, Kayvon Lee was the big kid. He was like 230 or something.
Allen's like 200 pounds. Yeah. I always get him and Lee as far as body type.
So Allen and Singleton
could change the pace.
2023 could be stupid good. It could be really
Well, and he's from
good.
Norfolk. The other kid's from Norfolk, Virginia. So I always tell you that's where the ballers are from. So
That's
Rick Doyle,
why he's
here's one
second
for you.
string.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, well played. Well played. Very well. Just came to you. That was good. I'm impressed. Total bullcrap, but it's here's one for you it's kind of NFL draft related, Ryan. Bowers or Mayer? So Brock Bowers or Michael Mayer, who has the better NFL career? Bowers is amazing, obviously, but I see Mayer dominating for years. I just say this, Ryan, tell me if you agree.
Yeah.
It's hard to say that because number one, I don't know what systems they're both going to be drafted into.
Exactly.
And then what kind of tight end are you looking for? If you're looking for a George Kittle, then yeah, you're probably going to look for, Brock Bowers. If you're looking for more of a traditional tight end, you're going to want Michael Mayer to me. So that's my thoughts. What are yours?
I mean, at some point, right, this conversation has to come to, do you value the full package or you just value one thing, right? That's where it comes down to. Can Brock Bowers be a more impactful pass game weapon than Michael Mayer? Yeah, it's very possible. It's very possible. The kid is an incredible athlete. There's no doubt. But he's not ever going to be a blocker. He's just not, right? Even if he gets up to 240, 245, he's just not going to be that guy. Like he's a mismatch weapon. Like you move him around and you take advantage of the mismatches you create. Michael Mayer can do a lot of that differently, not the same as far as how he wins. But then also he could block his tail off when and he's developing in that regard. So I think that Michael Mayer is the better all-around player. I do. I think Brock Bowers could be a more impactful receiver. This is a comparison between, again, do you want Kyle Pitts or do you want the all-around tight end that's a dominant player, right? So right. I think that Mayer is going to be a very successful player. I compare him to Jason Witten. Like I think that he reminds me of that dude. Like
somebody in the chat said he's a Dallas Cowboy guy, and you've used that Witten comparison before, and I think it makes a lot of sense. Ryan, can I get you three more?
Yes,
real quick before you get out of here. Here's a go from John A1. Better OT combo: Blake Fisher, Joe Alt, Ronnie Stanley, Mike McGlinchey, Eichenberg, Robert Hainsey.
I do think it's going to be Fisher Alt's projecting just slightly.
Okay.
I do. Because look, I'll say this. Out of all those players right there, I think Joe Alt leaves college as the best player of anybody on that board. I do.
He's got a chance.
I think he's going to end that way. Now, the second part is, what's the separation, right? How much better do I think Joe Alt's going to be than a Ronnie Stanley, for instance, right? Or better than a Liam Eichenberg. But I think that the pairing, again, if Blake Fisher even comes halfway to it, where he is now to his ceiling, then, I think it's a no-brainer at that point, right? Based upon what I've seen, I would go here Stanley McGlinchey from everything I know right now. But from where I think it will be, I think it's going to be Fisher Alt. I do.
I think right now it's Stanley McGlinchey. The 15 tackle tandem of McGlinchey and Stanley was, without question, the best we've seen. Without question. The one you left off was the 13 duo of Zach Martin and Ronnie Stanley was pretty darn good. That team only gave up 8 sacks that year with Ronnie Stanley at right tackle and Zach Martin left tackle. I think people forget that Ronnie Stanley was the right tackle that year. Yeah. And the Leonberg, Eichenberg and Hainsey were just really steady. Stanley and McGlinchey were dominant in 15. That's the best so far. I agree with you that Alt and Fisher will be, especially if they both come back in 2024.
Oh,
it will. You're talking about maybe one of the best tackle tandems in Notre Dame history, if not college football. That's a very high praise and a little bit absurd. But look what they just did as sophomores.
Right.
Imagine if they're seniors together. But yes, I think by the end of 2023, Ryan, I could see that. But if that's true, if we're even having that conversation, it's phenomenal because that offensive line in 15 was so good.
Yep.
So unbelievably good. That's what's funny is that one would have been the Joe Morrow Award winner to me. Because the Joe Morrow Award wasn't a thing then, was it? When did the Joe Morrow Award start? I'm not sure about that. But if I'd have to go look to see what the history of the Joe Morrow Award winners are, because if they didn't win it then goodness gracious, that award is just trash. Let me find it. It started in 15. They gave it to Alabama. Lost all respect for the Joe Moore Award because there was not a better line than Notre Dame's. There was not a better line than Notre Dame's in 2015. So yeah, that's going to be pretty nasty. The second one that I wanted to ask you, Ryan, and this is kind of for me, to be honest with you, TJ Stalika said, Brian, who would you rather as head coach for your Denver Broncos, DeMeco Ryans or Sean Payton? I'm going to give my answer. I'm curious to get yours.
Sure.
1,000% DeMeco Ryans, and I don't even know a lot about DeMeco Ryans. I've heard good things about him. But I think Sean Payton is an overrated coach. He's a good coach, but he's not worth giving up multiple draft picks to get, especially a first rounder. You already mortgaged your future for freaking Russell Wilson. So you're going to give me an overrated coach and an overrated quarterback, and I had to give up multiple first round draft picks to get there. Hard pass. So I'd rather take a chance on DeMeco in that instance.
That's the separator. That's exactly what I was going to say is if everything was created equal and I get both for the same price, yeah, I'd probably go Sean Payton. But the fact that Sean Payton comes with so much capital that you have to give up to get him, DeMeco Ryans, even if he's an unknown commodity.
Is he bringing in his prime Drew Brees with him? Because that's the reason they hired Nathaniel Haycock. Well, look how good he did with the Packers. He had freaking Aaron Rodgers. You know what I mean? Of course he did well there. Here's the last one, Ryan. This is a kind of a draft question. Logan Thayer asks, if Caleb Williams or Drake May was in this class, would the Bears trade away Justin Fields to take them number 1?
I think it's a better chance than it is this year. I think so. Yeah. Because, if you're staring Caleb Williams in the face and you say, hey, man, we like Justin, but it's probably our guy, right? Caleb Williams is significantly more talented as far as playing the quarterback position, right? So I think it's more likely that would happen this year, Logan, than it would if it was, the former in that regard. Yeah. So I think next year would be a lot more likely. I do.
Yeah, Drake May, maybe not. We still need to see a lot more from Drake May, but Caleb Williams doesn't have the holes that the other quarterbacks in this year's class have. Holes meaning we know about CJ Stroud. Bryce Young's, there's nothing he can do about it. Bryce Young is a complete quarterback outside of his body.
5'11", 185, or whatever he is.
Right. But his game is, flawless to a degree. I really think that it is. Caleb Williams doesn't have that, right? He's got truly elite skills. So yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot of teams tanking next year. There's going to be a battle the battle for the bottom of the NFL draft or for the NFL next year. I think could be even as competitive as the top, just because you're going to see teams trying to tank for Caleb Williams. I really think so. I really think so. So that's the only one I definitely had for you, Ryan, that I wanted to definitely get for you, but because I know you got to run, but you're obviously more than welcome to hang around for a little bit and finish the rest of these. But I know you got to go pick up your daughter. So it is what it is. Let's get down here to some more of these questions here. Stone Adore says, could Notre Dame's ranking next year be higher in the season, having played one or two more games than other teams? Alternatively, could the late buys later in the season hurt their ranking? Well, I think Stone Adore depends. It depends. If they go into November needing wins to climb up the rankings, let's say they've lost, let's say they're ranked 5th going into Columbus and they get blasted and drop to 11. They're going to have a hard time in November with having 2 weeks off and late October, November, and into November. Going to have a hard time climbing up where they need to get to. But that would have been the case anyway. I just think at the end of the day, I just think the buys are better for the team's health as far as being healthy, really healthy down the stretch, being healthy enough to get a win over Clemson, being healthy enough to then finish strong, and then going into the postseason as a really fresh team. So I like those. I don't think that they're going to have that. They're not going to be that much further ahead than everyone else. Just a game. A lot of teams are going to have late October, November buys. They're just going to not have the earlier buy. So it'll just be one game ahead. But if anything, I think it could help them, in a lot of different ways. It just depends on when they lose. And the problem for Notre Dame this year is none of their losses that we expect them to lose, unless they lose to NC State and then beat everybody else. But none of their projected losses, Ohio State, USC, or Clemson, are as the 3 most likely losses. If they're going to have a loss, is going to be one where you say, boy, it was so early, it doesn't matter. So I just feel like if they beat Ohio State, but then go beat USC and Clemson, I think they'll be okay as long as they don't get blasted. And I think if anything, I don't think Notre Dame's going to be ranked super high early, probably top 15-ish. So you can say getting to play every week and getting a chance to go out there and just win and get better as a team is going to help with their ranking. And then maybe when the first committee rankings come out, and, let's say Notre Dame is 6th and they've got 2 buys, during that period of time, these teams are knocking each other off, and Notre Dame's just sitting there coasting. So yeah, they're not moving up because of the wins, but they're not moving down because they're getting beat. So I think that's another part that factors into it as well for me when I look at it. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. I got to get a couple more here before I get out of here. Let's see here. Logan Thayer says, if you could fill one entire position group with 5 stars every year, but never land any 5 stars at other positions, which would you rank? Treat the D-line and edge as separate because they'd be too easy. Well, I mean, like D-line and edge. So let's say in that instance, we're going to go with a 4 down then. That's my answer. I mean, I think you kind of jumped kind of where my answer would be if there was one position and when I say 5 stars, not 5-star recruits, but 5-star players. That'd be my other premise. The other thing let's accept is when we're not talking about what recruits they were talking about what they are in college. I really feel like if you've got an elite 5-star, just destroy people right up the middle defensive tackles, like look at Georgia last year. Give me a Jordan Davis and a Jalen Carter at 3 technique and nose. Jordan Davis would be my nose. Jalen Carter would be my 3 technique. And I mean, if I'm just good everywhere else, I'm going to dominate you. Give me a bunch of top 100 to 150 caliber 4 stars with those 2 dudes up the middle, and I'm going to be really good on defense. Really good on defense. That'd be mine. I mean, look, corner would not be corner because if you have great corners, but you can't rush the passer, it doesn't matter as much. It wouldn't be linebacker because everything is dependent on the D line. And to me, if I could say, give me a 5-star edges or 5-star interior guys, I'm taking the 5-star interior guys. Again, we're talking about those guys being 5 stars as college players. That's where it would be for me. That's just, I think that's, and I'll be honest with you, there's not a position on offense that I would care about having nothing but 5 stars other than quarterback. Again, we're talking about what they are as players in college, not recruits. There's really only 2 positions to me that I care about, and that's quarterback and D tackle. That's it. If I have 5 stars there and I'm just good everywhere else, I'm going to have a really, really, really good football team. Really good football team. So that's my take. That'd be my take on that one. Good question. Very good questions. Very, very good questions. Let's get to some more here. We got one from Omar Austin. All the 2022 and 23 linebackers are moving to line because of the numbers or depth problem going forward. So I don't know of any of the 2023 linebackers that are moving to the line. So I missed that if that's the case. I think it's not so much a numbers or depth problem. Cause okay, so you're saying will it cause a numbers or depth problem? No, I don't think so, because I think Notre Dame is kind of moving away a little bit. So I guess yeah, hold on a second. Let me see it. Did this break now? Hold on a second. Give me a second, everybody. All right, so it has been announced. So hold on a second. Yeah, so I see people tweeting about it, so I don't know if it broke. I was asked not to say anything about this, but yeah, James Laurinaitis is going back to Ohio State. So that is going to be there. Yeah. So yeah. So yep, that's the reality. So I'm not sure what Notre Dame's going to do now. It just kind of happened within the last 24 hours. So yeah, we shall see. But yeah. So anyway, so it's out there, and we expect that to be the case, but there's no official announcement yet, but we expect that to be the case. All right, so next we have here Michael Keeley says, do you think Notre Dame fans gain the respect of Ohio State fans similarly to what you've mentioned happened with Georgia in the past? Went to their place and played them tough for a game. Here's the thing for me, Michael. There's 110,000 people in that stadium. I'm sure some of them gained respect for Notre Dame. Most of the Ohio State fans I know just think Ohio State didn't play very well. Oh, this guy didn't play. He was hurt. This guy was hurt. Most Ohio State fans I know just you can't have rational football conversations with. There's Notre Dame fans like that, and there's other people like that, but just the ones that I know. So I can only speak anecdotally. There's an Ohio State fan here says he's always respected Notre Dame. So, but that was there before. I couldn't tell you. I really don't know. I haven't gotten that vibe, though. I haven't gotten that. Like Georgia fans, I got that vibe immediately right after the game. There's Georgia fans cheering for Notre Dame as they ran off the field at the end of that game. They just respected how hard they competed. And the fans respected it. I don't know that Ohio State fans are that way. So, yeah. So, maybe it's 1 second. All right. So anyway, all right, let's get to these next questions as we wrap up here. Get to here. That was a good question though from Logan Thayer. I really like that one. The one about 5 stars. That's an interesting one. Christopher Leone asked, "Do you think the Pac-12 will break through and make the playoffs this next season? It looks like a lot of those programs have good talent and return good quarterbacks. Thank you and have a great weekend." Well, I think that there's some that have a chance. I absolutely think there's some that have a chance. Look, to me, USC has a chance. Like if USC runs the table this year, they're a playoff team. I mean, they're going to have a win over a good Notre Dame team. They'll have to beat Washington and Oregon. They'll have to beat Oregon on the road. They'll have to beat UCLA plus the Pac-12 championship. I mean, that's just the reality of it. So, look, if they go on the road and beat Notre Dame on the road, that's going to give them a lot of love. They get Utah at home. So we talked earlier about here's what USC would have to do in the last 6 games to be a playoff team. They'd have to beat Notre Dame on the road, Utah, Cal on the road. That should be an easy one. Washington at home, at Oregon, and then UCLA at home. And then they'd have to win the Pac-12 championship. So yeah, they run the table, and let's just say USC loses early to Arizona State in a weird game. And then they run the table on that. They're going to have a really good shot of getting to the playoff. Another team that I would look at as having that similar opportunity is Washington. Look, I think Washington probably has to go 13-0 or 12-1 with a somewhat of an early loss, but Washington will have a chance. They'd have to have kind of like a TCU scenario if they have a loss where they got in. Like, let's be real. TCU got in because some teams got beat right down the stretch. The committee would have loved to have put a one-loss USC that won out down a stretch in there, and Ohio State and teams like that, but they didn't, and so Ohio State backed in. And if Clemson runs the table down the stretch, if Clemson and USC both run the table down the stretch, I think there's a legitimate case that they would have made. I wouldn't have bought it, but they would have made the bump TCU out and put one of those 2 teams into the playoff. I absolutely think they would have done that. I wouldn't have agreed with it, but I think they would have done that. So Washington would need something like that or run the table. And I think they've got a schedule that's capable of it, but it's going to be tough. But it's the same thing. They got to play at Michigan State, and then they got Boise at home. So it gives them 2 relatively reputable wins. Play at Arizona, then they have a bye. Coming out of that bye, they have Oregon at home on October 14th, Arizona State at home, at Stanford, at USC on November 4th, home against Utah, at Oregon State on the 18th, and then home against Washington State on the 25th, and then the Pac-12 championship. So I think USC is going to be ranked. I think Utah is going to be ranked. I think Oregon State's going to be ranked. And I think Washington State's going to be a quality team. I love that their quarterback's coming back. I thought their coach did a solid job. They played good defense for Washington State. So I could see Washington State being a team that's also a tough win too. So part of it is how your schedule sets up. And I think both of those teams' schedule set up well that allow them to kind of go out and win some games and have some success and build up a reputation of, wow, did you see who they beat in late October or November or whatever the case may be, and go from there. And so I think that is 2 teams that I look at. I don't know if any of those other teams are capable of it. I think Oregon has a similar situation where Oregon could be a team that schedule-wise could get there. They play at Texas Tech, they play at Washington, they play at Utah, they play USC at home, and then they play Oregon State. So they'll have a schedule that absolutely can give them a chance to get there at 12-1 and 11 or 13-0. But I just don't think they're as good of a team as those other 2, to be completely honest with you. And that's kind of where I'm looking at it for that one. So it's going to be interesting. Somebody mentioned this in the chat. Drew Pine is going to play against all those teams. So unless they get Jaden Rashad and decide to start him this year, you're probably going to have Drew Pine as your starter at Arizona State. And then what do they do? What are they going to do in regard to, you're going to be sitting there watching Arizona State, watching Notre Dame, being like, let's go, Drew, let's get it done. Right. The it's going to be fun to watch. Going to be fun to watch, and I hope that he's able to kind of have an impact. Could you imagine, like, late in the year, Notre Dame's 5th, and an Oregon or a USC or a Washington is 4th, and Arizona State knocks that team off with Drew Pine? That'd be pretty cool. I think that'd be really cool. So yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. Be a lot of fun. So let's get to some more here as we wrap this up. So many great questions today. Robert Bishop says, does anyone think Spencer Sanders or Rattler can work their way into the first round? Look, I think if Spencer Rattler has a big year, he could, just because he throws a beautiful ball and somebody's going to overrate him. I don't think either one of them are first-round draft picks. Let's see here. Abent Nandi, how overrated is Arch Manning, and how much unfair pressure will he be under? I don't think he's incredibly overrated. I mean, he's not a top 10 player. He's a top 35, probably 25, 30 player for me. He's a really good quarterback. He's a 5-star, borderline 5-star. He's not a top 5 guy. The pressure, I mean, it's enormous. I mean, he's a Manning. He's going to have all of that weight on his shoulders. But you know what? The first two handled it pretty well. And the thing, if you look at Arch, and he's just kind of like this mild-mannered, he's a lot like Eli, to be honest with you, where he just doesn't care. Like, he put some update about his first week at Texas out, and he put it on LinkedIn. Like, what? Like, he doesn't tweet. He's not on social media. He just goes out there and plays ball. I don't think he's a truly, truly elite player, and so he's going to need some talent around him, but he's going to be smart, and he's a pretty decent athlete, and he's a pretty darn good quarterback. You know, I'd probably say probably 35 to 50 is probably where I'd say I'd probably have him in my ranking. I haven't finished my final rankings yet, so I can't say for sure. You know, but again, he's a borderline 5-star kid for me, because he has a lot of the intangibles that you want in a quarterback, and I think that's important. We have Jim Bob Billy Pants asks, do you think Hartman has the it factor? Honestly, you know, to me, I can't tell you. Because I'll say this, he did at Wake Forest, but it's a different animal than Notre Dame. And so it doesn't always translate. You can have the it factor in an FCS school and then go to the Division I, and you just don't have it there, because it's the pressure's greater, the spotlight is greater, all the aspects of it are just far greater, and you have to be able to kind of handle things that you don't really know how you're going to handle it until you actually are put in that situation. So you could say, hey, I did this at Wake Forest and I was totally fine. Wake Forest has like a 30,000 something seat stadium, right? I mean, sorry, it's just a different animal. They're not playing in games that are going to have the magnitude of what he's going to be playing at almost every week at Notre Dame. And so the reality is you can't know how he's going to handle that. Based on what he did at Wake Forest, I like to think that he's going to be in position to do that. But, like, look, he plays at home. He played at home last year against Clemson. There were 32,903 people in the stands that day. That's it. You know, when he goes to Clemson this year, Clemson's packing 70, 80,000 people in their states and their seats. When he's playing Notre Dame, they're going to have 81,000 people in the seats, over twice as many people, completely different environment, and it's just a different pressure package. It's you know, if you beat Clemson when you're at Wake Forest, you're like, wow, generational upset, what a great win, blah, blah, blah. You do it at Notre Dame, it's like, well, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. You're the quarterback at Notre Dame. Fair or not, that's just the reality. That's just the reality. And I don't know if he's going to be able to handle that. I don't know. We're going to find out if he's capable of having that. Last one here, and then I'm going to wrap up here. Oh, here we go. Logan Thayer, last two. He says, would you rate Manning or Carr higher if they were in the same year? I would rate Carr higher. I think CJ Carr has better physical tools. He's more accurate. He's got a better arm. He's similar athletes. Arch has got a little bit better body, but I think Logan, I think CJ has a little cleaner release. So I think CJ is the better player. I do. I think CJ Carr is a really excellent player. I had him as a 4.5-star grade kid as a sophomore. I don't give that kind of grade out very often. He jumped up to a 5-star as a junior. And part of it was because of some of the struggles he had. He had a really bad game early in the year. He had like several turnovers, and it's like, okay, let's see what this kid's made of. And he bounced back the next week and just ripped his opponent apart. I was like, okay, that kid showed me something. He had a really bad week, and he stepped up and really, really did well. And he taught me something that week. So I thought that was impressive. That was really impressive. So I liked what I saw from him in that regard. So that is actually going to do it, folks, because I have to get rolling. And we've got the IB Nation Sports Talk show starting right now. They are getting ready to go live with their Friday rapid fire. So go check that out right now. Before you do, though, however, please hit that like button, folks. Please hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. Leave us a 5-star review. And as always, make sure you check out the boards at or sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you guys again here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.